Today, S will tell you a new story. Not a villain, not a hero, and not a nice guy, but the tragic story of Yuri Bryan, the third prince of one of the most powerful empires on this continent, who was framed for the crime of genocide. From a young age, he was destined to become the future head of the family due to his exceptional talent in swordsmanship. But he soon fell from grace, swayed by the nobles. Having lost his way so early, he quickly became a pawn for others to exploit. After his family was annihilated, all the subsequent crimes were blamed on him. By now, it was too late for him to realize his mistakes and find a way to atone. After more than 30 years, he had become an infamous mercenary, but he didn't fight for money, but for revenge. So in every battle, he fought to the death. As long as the enemy was alive, he would keep fighting. But in the end, he couldn't accomplish anything more. He still had to suffer and die at the tip of his best friend's sword. After opening his eyes once more, Yuri Bryan accidentally discovered that he had been reborn 15 years before his kingdom's destruction. Perhaps this is said a bit too much. Well then, let's get right into the story. A lone cottage amidst the freezing cold, snow covering everything. Inside a house, some men were whispering amongst themselves. Have you heard the rumor? There's a madman wandering the battlefields lately. A madman? This person slammed his beer mug on the table. They say he has soulless eyes, especially for a mercenary, and after every battle, he disappears to find the next fight. A mercenary who doesn't even care about his own life. How strange. But that madman is always muttering, "I survived again." The two continue to exchange words. They say he always appears in battles related to the empire. People say he doesn't fight for money, but for a personal grudge. Just hearing it is infuriating. So who is that madman anyway? A scene of a pool of blood on a wide, snowy road appears. Well, according to the rumors, is he the prince of a fallen kingdom? A young man, drained of strength, sat leaning against a rock. They say he's always looking for a place to die. This soldier, standing before him, wondered to himself, self-destruction. Self-destruction, is that the best answer you can come up with? Back then, he was like a living corpse, with sunken eyes, skeletal and thin. The third prince of Bryan, Yuri Bryan, the disgraceful name who single-handedly destroyed his own kingdom, returning to the past. 15 years ago, at the 20 casino, the place was bustling. Let's go. And that sinner, the sole survivor of the fallen kingdom. He's the third prince of Bryan, Yuri Bryan, 18 years old. He slammed the table and shouted, "I'm really lucky today." Accompanying him was the royal magician, Honan Dao. He wondered, "It's amazing. How do you win every time, Your Highness?" A few people were getting up, about to leave. "It's just luck. Do you think I'm any different?" "What's this? You're all getting up. Why not play another round?" Yuri was drunk, his gambling spirit flaring up. "Double the bet this time." Seeing this, Honan Dao frowned and gently reminded him, "We should get going. If we stay here any longer, we'll be late for our appointment." Suddenly, a hand slammed on the table. "We were being civil. Why don't you take the hint and get lost?" These two men glared at him angrily. "You think we don't know you're cheating? Using such cheap tricks? How ridiculous." Yuri, refusing to be humiliated, slammed the table and stood up. "Cheap? Who do you think I am, huh?" They all started mocking him. "Look at the way you act. You're definitely not a noble. You think you're the king of this country? King my ass. If you were really royalty, I wouldn't let him off so easily." At this, Yuri was furious. His face red as a beet just listening to them. Am I right? Provoking the empire for no reason. Escalating tensions to war. Who can stand that? Even the princes are the same. Like father, like son. Useless, all of them. From the very beginning. What can a family that's only good at swinging swords even do? At this, Yuri angrily swept the cards off the table. This left the men stunned and confused. What the dash? He stepped closer. "Listen up, you three idiots." He cracked his knuckles and introduced himself. "I'm the third prince of Bryan, Yuri Bryan." Hearing this, the group recoiled in shock. "And today you all," Yuri's face beamed, "will be reborn thanks to me." Every single one of them immediately turned pale as a ghost. Night had fallen. Now, Yuri was flustered, explaining himself to a young woman. "Don't you see I'm telling the truth? I was late because father had an urgent meeting. I already told you through the communication orb. She is the imperial princess, Catherine Ivana Grayson." She said nothing, just frowned at him. "I mean, can't you let me off the hook this one time?" Catherine's voice was stern. "Do you think you're the only one who has trouble making time? Do you know how far I had to travel, sneaking away from prying eyes just to get here?" No, I understand. But please, try to understand my situation as well. Yuri replied, scratching his head. Because father is currently away from his post. I have to be careful for a while. Actually, I'm not even allowed to tell this to anyone. Her expression immediately turned fearsome. Oh, so I'm anyone in your eyes? Seeing this, Yuri jumped. No, that's not it. Then, Catherine directly threw away the green jade bracelet. If you don't trust me that much, then why did you give this to me? Why not give it to some other woman, whom you trust more? She said, turning away in disappointment. Don't contact me until I contact you first. Wait, watching her figure leave, he could only call out her name. Catherine. Yuri picked up the bracelet, wondering what should I do. He was so flustered he didn't notice someone hiding and watching. Making up with her this time is probably going to be very difficult. This person flashed a very sinister smile. From that day on, the already fragile relationship between Brian and the Empire reached its final limit. Mere provocations from the Empire's side began to cross the line, and the conflict between the two nations began to spiral out of control. Yuri's eyes suddenly flew open. It's an invasion. Brian Castle was engulfed in a sea of flames. The Empire has invaded Brian. Many people had fallen. Yuri shouted orders. Everyone, evacuate immediately. He ran forward at full speed. Tell all the citizens near the castle to get out of there now. Finally, the war with the Empire had officially begun. After many eras passed and countless lives were sacrificed, the war showed no signs of stopping. At that time, his brother Joshua had also breathed his last. On the battlefield, Yuri was also fighting desperately. Your Highness, we must evacuate immediately. Have the reinforcements still not arrived? Brian's mightiest force, what the people called the strongest on the entire continent, all because of the absence of a single man. The tide of war gradually turned in the Empire's favor. At first, I just called it coincidence and ignored it. Maybe I was trying to deny the reality that I didn't want to believe was true. However, when I remember the life and death battles I've been through, and as my reason slowly returned, I could only come to one conclusion. The betrayal of Catherine, the only person to whom I'd told everything. The period when father left Brian was precisely when the Empire began its ruthless invasion. I had hoped that strange coincidence was just me, being paranoid, but the reply to the letter I struggled so hard to send to Catherine was just, at that moment, Yuri looked down in despair. On the piece of paper she sent him was a single word, sorry, nothing but despair. The Imperial soldiers have found him. Over there, the Prince of Brian. If we catch him, Brian is finished. He gritted his teeth. Why doesn't this ever end? Then, Yuri charged into battle. With each swing of his sword, he cut them down one by one. One enemy tried to attack from the side. Luckily, Yuri reacted in time and blocked. By now, his entire body was trembling uncontrollably. Then, with another slash, Yuri was victorious. After finishing one, he stood panting heavily. Yuri realized someone else was coming from behind. Not just one, but an entire squad. Yuri was suddenly stunned and in despair. His knees buckled. Damn it, is this the end? An enemy lunged to attack him. The sword in his hand fell accordingly. Yuri squeezed his eyes shut, preparing to accept his fate. Suddenly, someone stood up, shielding him, taking a fatal blow for him. Blood splattered onto Yuri's face. He froze, helplessly crying out, Roland, but he still slowly collapsed. Before dying, Roland managed to utter a few words. Please survive, Your Highness. Yuri was heartbroken by his passing. Roland, then, more soldiers from the Brian family appeared to protect Yuri. They tried to persuade him. It's no use. Please run, Your Highness. If something happens to you, Brian will have no future. Hurry, run, Your Highness. Yuri gritted his teeth, hesitating before making a decision. Urged on by the enemy's shouts, he decided to run. The Prince of Brian is running away. Get it? By now, it was the next morning. The soldiers were still relentlessly searching for him. He couldn't have gotten far. Find the prince. Yuri was now hiding somewhere. He panted, each breath ragged. I can't keep hiding in here forever. Worry was etched on his face. Somehow, I have to break through their encirclement and plan for the future, remembering his father's image. I wonder how father's doing now. The fact that he hasn't returned yet probably means he's been killed by the Empire. Just then, the door to his hiding place creaked open. An Imperial soldier had found him. Yuri panicked. No, if I die here, Brian's future will. Then he spoke, surprising the man. Please spare me. Yuri knelt down. If I die here, Brian will be completely unable to resist. The Knights of Brian sacrificed themselves for me. His hand trembled uncontrollably. What I'm trying to say is... Yuri squeezed his eyes shut. I'm sorry, the man replied. I won't give a long explanation. The crimes committed by the Empire will be paid for. Yuri was stunned. Before long, Imperial soldiers will swarm this place. So go. And just like that, he ran straight into the forest. His heart was in turmoil. No matter what, I have to survive. I have to live to restore Brian and take revenge on the Empire. However, my ideal was nothing more than naive arrogance. Reality was unexpectedly cruel. A heavy rain poured down as if mocking him. Each of his footsteps was heavy. In the end, everyone died. All that bloodshed, what was it all for? Now, I don't even have an excuse to justify it. He even dropped that sorry note. Yes, now I wield my sword, only to punish myself. With one hand, he clutched the necklace Catherine had left behind. One day, someone will appear, and you will end my life. Returning to the present, the soldier spoke. Rumor has it you're looking for a place to die. Yuri's eyes remained soulless, staring ahead. The man relentlessly questioned him. So that's the reason you charge into the most dangerous battlefields, recklessly throwing yourself in without a care for your fate. To live or die is merely a way to find rest. Self-destruction, is that the best answer you could come up with? You truly are selfish to the very end. From within the mask, a red light flashed. Even death is too good a reward for someone like you. You speak with such conviction, while your eyes look as if they want to kill me right now. End it. Third Prince of Brian, Yuri Brian. Suddenly, Yuri was astonished. Anyone who knew my past should have been dead by now. The man gently removed his helmet. All of this is because of you. Behind the mask was none other than Roland. His face was covered in scars and filled with resentment. All of this tragedy is because of you alone. Yuri was terrified and astonished, not believing his eyes. Roland remembered that scene. That voice, it was definitely him. But he died back then. How could this be? Roland raised his sword high. The reason the kingdom of Brian fell to the cheap schemes of the Empire, the oath and honor of the Flandre family, who were always loyal to the royal family, and my own dignity and faith, all of it was shattered in that moment. He rushed towards the prince. Yuri Brian, a man who should have been dead, now returned in the form of a vengeful spirit. A fatal blow, just to question the mistakes of his past. My sins, blood-splattered. Yuri wore that damned green jade necklace. I thought I would feel a little more relieved after I died. This damn feeling of guilt. The gem on the necklace suddenly glowed with a green light. Weighs on me even in my final moments. His father's words suddenly echoed in his mind. An heir of Brian never abandons their honor, even in death. When he opened his eyes again, Yuri had surprisingly returned to the past in the form of a young boy. Amidst incessant calls, Yuri, Brian, Yuri, he still couldn't make sense of anything. As he glanced to his side, you haven't opened your eyes for 3 days. Fear, his father, sat beside him very worried. Are you all right? Yuri sat up, clutching his head in confusion. Father, a drop of sweat rolled down his cheek as he thought. My father, who had passed away. No way. Yuri, thinking this was hell, spoke up and asked. So, you ended up in hell too, father? I can understand it for myself. But why you? His father furrowed his brow in confusion. What's this? Then Yuri grabbed his hand. Yuri said sadly, for someone who always spoke of honor, your life was truly dissolute, father. At that moment, fear couldn't hold back anymore and punched him to his senses. What the hell are you talking about? Yuri, with a big swollen cheek from the blow, felt wrong. Even after coming to hell, that violent streak of yours still hasn't changed? Repent. At least for now. At that moment, he was surprised to see falling leaves. He looked out the window, bewildered. His eyes widened in confusion. They're not there. Outside the window, there was only a peaceful scene with trees and a lake. There were also maids happily cleaning. I don't see them. Yuri suddenly realized, if this is hell, there should be sinners and the terrifying fires of purgatory, right? And demons should be mocking and torturing me, too. A thought flashed through his mind. Wait, then this place is... At that moment, his 2 older brothers arrived. Yuri, you're awake? Suddenly, the scene before his eyes began to fade. Yuri fainted once again amidst everyone's calls. He had traveled back 5 years in time. The third Prince of Brian, Yuri Brian, age 13. Yuri was helpless. At first, I thought it was a dream or a long memory. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wake up. The world didn't end. Instead, old scenarios buried deep in my memory kept repeating, and I couldn't help but admit it. Just then, Yuri was sitting at the dining table with the sound of his brothers laughing and talking. He was still incredibly surprised. The truth is, I've returned to the past, back to the spring when I was 13. The truth is, I've been given another chance. A pair of hands pulled open the curtains outside the window. A voice reminded him, "Your Highness, please wake up." Yuri poked his head out from under the blanket. "You told me to wake you up." His expression became determined. "It's time for sword practice." He sat bolt upright as soon as he woke up, then hurriedly got out of bed. "Aina, quick, give me my clothes first." "No, I mean my bat." Yuri touched his feet to the ground. "Your Highness, please calm down." Aina cheerfully advised, "I'll help you wash your face first. Please sit here." Suddenly, a tragic image of Aina being murdered appeared in his mind. She had collapsed in this very room. Yuri's face darkened, and he said nothing. "Yes." Then he turned to face her. "Aina." "Yes, Your Highness." Yuri smiled and held up 3 fingers. "Slap me in the face 3 times really hard." Aina was flustered. "Pardon me, are you asking me to commit treason, Your Highness?" Yuri was still very confident. "If I tell you to do it, it's not treason. Are you sure?" He gave a self-satisfied smile. Yuri Brian, always keep my sworn oath." And so, the sound of thunderous slaps echoed in the room. Yuri was now outside in the training yard. His cheek was red and swollen. I'd forgotten that Aina has incredible strength. The others passing by were even laughing at me. Not a single person offered to put any medicine on it. The 2 swords continued to clash. Bernard, Yuri's sword master, was focused only on teaching him swordsmanship. Yuri lamented inwardly. Even Bernard didn't bother to ask me anything about my cheek. He looked seriously at the man, and he's simply just sparring with me. He doesn't even correct my posture. Yuri wondered, when did Bernard start teaching just by sparring? An image from the past appeared. Bernard was reporting to fear. He is a natural genius intellectually. But it's a pity. His face was grave. If the prince were just a little more sincere, he could have been a blessing for Brian. Back then, he was eavesdropping from behind the door. That's right. It was definitely from that moment. In the end, it was always just sparring, because I wouldn't cooperate during training sessions. Now, his hand tightened on the sword. After hearing that I was getting lazier and lazier, instead of trying harder, Yuri suddenly called out, "Bernard!" His face was determined. "From today onwards, please teach me seriously." He raised his sword forward and declared, Yuri Brian, will train seriously from now on." Hearing this, Bernard smirked and replied, "I don't know what has suddenly influenced you, but very well, Your Highness." Yuri also smiled brightly. Then, Bernard also seriously raised his sword. A blue sword aura enveloped him. His eyes were ice cold. "From now on, we will begin the real training." And just like that, he lunged at the prince before Yuri could react. Yuri panicked. "Wait, Bernard." Then, Bernard backed away. Yuri laughed helplessly. That's right. The killing intent emanating from him was immense. Yuri laughed in fearful helplessness. Before Bernard came to Brian, he was known by the nickname Sword Demon. A moment later, his sword fell. As Yuri lay breathless on the ground, he thought, so this is what proper training under the Sword Demon Bernard is like. If it weren't for my mercenary experience, things would have been much worse. He raised his hand. Although I'm a bit tired and my whole body is scratched, but at this rate, my skills will improve quickly, right? Just then, Bernard looked at him, also very surprised, wondering to himself. He blocked all of my attacks. When did the prince improve this much? Suddenly, a voice calling "Your Highness" caught his attention. Aina rushed in breathlessly. "I think you should stop and come out. His Majesty has summoned you." Yuri sat up, puzzled. His Majesty? Why? His eyes widened at Aina's words. It seems that Count Johann has brought his son. Count Johann's son is, remembering that tragic image, the one who betrayed the kingdom and paved the way for the empire in my previous life. My, Gav Bakva, is that the bastard's name? Then Yuri spoke. Aina, yes. His entire body exuded an aura of killing intent and resentment. That bastard. Where is he now? A moment later, food was served on the table. Everyone was eating together with Count Johann and his son. He casually cut his beef. The third prince looks so different now. Johann smiled. He's even gained weight. But fear, still not used to it, showed his dislike. I think my son must have taken the wrong medicine or something. If there is such a thing, I'd like my son to have a dose too. During the two Fathers exchange, Goth glanced over at Yuri and his brothers. Your son is already intelligent. He still has much to learn. He looked with admiration at the elegant and scholarly older brother with glasses, then was startled when he looked towards Yuri. He was frowning with annoyance, staring at Goth. This made Goth nervous, and he avoided his gaze. Suddenly, Yuri's brother nudged him. He asked, "Brother, do you have a problem with it?" He still looked at him with those eyes. "Actually, yes. He backstabbed me." Hearing this, his brother laughed with delight. "So what are you going to do?" The almighty Yuri Brian. Yuri frowned. Outwardly, he acts all high and mighty, but inwardly he's busy, finding ways to please others. He looked at Goth, who was avoiding his gaze. He hasn't changed at all. Just then, Goth got angry and squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't care and glanced at Yuri with a resentful look. Then Yuri also relaxed his facial muscles. "I won't do anything. I have to control my anger." He remembered that time. "All of this is because of you, Goth. But in this life, I can't repeat the same path as before." Scene changed to outside. Yuri was still calculating in his heart. Come to think of it, around this time, I once had a completely one-sided duel with Goth. Could it be that he chose to betray us because he held a grudge from that day? Just then, he threw a wooden sword at him. "All right, Goth, I heard you're good with a sword." Goth replied dazedly, I know a little about it." "We will," but Yuri interrupted him. Silence. The two of them exchanged words while Yuri's brother watched. "The kingdom doesn't need weak knights." "Weak? I'm not even an official knight yet." Yuri raised his sword first. "Aren't you about to become a knight? Who serves this kingdom?" Hearing this, Goth tried to evade. Yes, but..." Then Yuri charged forward with his sword. "Then let's have a duel." Like a demon, he struck straight at him. Goth barely managed to block. "A sneak attack. What a cowardly act," Yuri replied from behind him. Then he kicked, a sweeping blow that grazed Goth's face. Just then, Goth clutched his face and demanded, "Third Prince, please maintain the spirit of chivalry." Suddenly, Yuri dropped the wooden sword in his hand. This made Goth panic. He's dropping his weapon. Yuri confidently rushed towards him, unarmed. With a single kick, he sent him and his sword flying. Goth lay in pain on the ground. Yuri then picked up the wooden sword again. He pointed it straight at his face. "Goth Bakva," he thought to himself. "In your previous life, you used your father's glory to sell information to the Empire." Then Yuri asked aloud, "Your father is a great count and a respectable knight. What do you think those titles exist for?" He rested the sword on his shoulder. "What are they for?" "That's..." Yuri knew. "I know you just want to survive. Today, this time, you will stand firm in Brian." Then he raised his hand towards Good. "Are these questions too difficult for you?" "Yes. I don't understand what you mean, Your Highness." Yuri watched him intently. "I will not allow any knight to think like that, not even myself." Under Good's wary gaze, Yuri continued to question him. "I will ask you again. Why is your father a count? And who bestowed that title upon him?" He took Good's hand and lifted him up. "Try to understand the nature of the situation from now on. Think clearly about what I've said here." Then he left, not forgetting to turn and bow his head in farewell. Just then, his older brother approached. "That was so inspiring. You're really good at fighting. Did you think I would lose?" And yet, he grinned from ear to ear and said aloud, "Yes," leaving Yuri speechless at his brother's childishness. He sighed, "Brother, what am I to you?" He gave a thumbs up, the troublemaker and the worst gambler to ever exist in this kingdom. Yuri looked at him helplessly. "Brother, I'm not like that anymore. You should stop causing trouble too." This seemed to scare his brother more than any ghost. "Why you? Did you fall and hit your head?" Yuri just smiled benevolently. The sky was now turning to dusk. The sun was setting behind the mountains. Yuri, having just finished his sword practice, was completely out of breath. He collapsed onto the floor. Bernard approached and praised him. "Good work. Let's stop here for today." He called out, "Prince." Yuri turned his head up. Bernard said seriously, "I think you are ready to learn a mana method, Your Highness." He sat up abruptly, surprised. "Ready? Are you going to teach me your method?" "No, mine is not good enough for your potential. You should learn the Brian method." Yuri's eyes widened. "Why? That's an excellent method. It's very effective and pure." Suddenly, he gripped his sword tightly. "I learned the Brian method in my past life. I mastered it when I was a mercenary." But then, Yuri lifted his sword. Bernard wondered, "Are you thinking of learning a different method, Your Highness?" "I'm thinking." Yuri seemed to remember something. He looked at Bernard cheerfully. "Introduce me to someone decent from the Royal Guard. Based on potential, not current skill." He lamented internally. "There is a technique that I couldn't even learn in my past life." Bernard pondered potential. His gaze was firm. "If we're talking purely about potential, then Gerald is the one." He was surprised. Him, based solely on potential. Yuri looked away and spoke a name. "Gerald." He closed his eyes and thought. "Before my regression, I met him at the end of the war. Remembering that scene, his skills were just passable. It's a surprise. he could survive that long with that level of skill. Back then, a trembling Zero said to him, "I'm so frustrated." About what? His potential was truly special. Zero gritted his teeth. "I could have been so much stronger if I had been trained back then." But he didn't hone it, and by the time the war started, Yuri smiled and replied, "Hey, it's no use. We were both unskilled back then." In the present, Yuri dusted off his clothes and stood up. "All right." Then, he smiled and stepped forward. "Shall we go meet that lazy knight?" Meanwhile, Zero was practicing with his sword. Yuri smiled and made up his mind. "I will enlighten him." The sky was turning to dusk. On a balcony, someone was looking down, observing. He glanced behind him as someone opened the door and entered. Yuri had arrived and raised his hand in greeting. Raso wondered, "Prince, what brings you here?" "I came to see how everyone is doing." He replied cheerfully, "They're still not as good as you, Prince, but we are trying our best." Yuri observed below. Everyone seemed very spirited. He spoke up. "Where is Zero?" "Ah, you mean the new guy? He's over there." He rested his chin on his hand, thinking, "I see what Bernard meant." Below, Zero was practicing with his sword. Practice should be driven by the will to improve one's skills. And yet, he only does just enough to get by. Yuri lamented, "At this rate, his talent will go to waste." Then he proposed, "Sir Raso, bring out a wooden sword. I will also join the sparring." "Oh, I see. Who will you be fighting?" Yuri cheerfully pointed down. "With that slacking bastard over there." A moment later, Yuri and Zero faced each other. The onlookers started cheering, "Newbie, good luck. Stay on your guard." This made Zero look up with some anxiety. Yuri also spoke up. "Sir Zero, I hear you're very talented." He smiled, somewhat threateningly. "Would you like to show me what kind of knight you are?" "No," Zero answered evasively. "Yes, of course." Yuri lifted his foot. "Well then," and he began his attack. "I hope you won't disappoint me." He watched him charge. In one move, Zero blocked his attack. The men above commented, "Just as I thought, Zero, you have no wasted movements, Prince. I'm cheering for you." "The prince is pretty good, isn't he?" At this, Zero frowned. "No, this is too strange." Yuri attacked relentlessly. Zero gritted his teeth, looked down, and lamented internally. His timing is almost unnaturally consistent. Yuri swung his sword nimbly, and just like that, he smirked. "He's deliberately matching my pace. Not fun at all, is it?" The two swords clashed. This is no different from a play. "Now then, let's fight properly." The two clashed, sending sparks flying. Zero gritted his teeth, backing away and looking at Yuri. He thought, he blocked that blow. Just as I thought. His reflexes are extraordinary. Then Yuri started swinging his sword at him. Zero dodged, and so it went, one attacking, one dodging. He thought, helpless. I was planning to fight moderately, but Zero counterattacked, knocking Yuri back. He gritted his teeth, blocking. Damn it, is it not working? Even with my memories from my past life, Zero is still a seasoned knight. I thought I could beat him. His eyes were determined, looking forward. But Zero looked surprised. Yuri crouched and raised his sword to Zero's confusion. He smirked. At least I have to land one hit. And then he ran past Zero and struck him. He was as excited as a child. There it is. The onlookers started to cheer. Did that attack really hit him? Prince, you're amazing. Yuri returned to his fighting stance. You're not going easy on me, are you? Not all. Zero was confused. It's strange. I'm the one attacking, but somehow I feel like I'm the one being cornered. Yuri advanced towards him step by step. He threw a lucky shot, which Zero dodged. Yuri feigned regret. What a shame. This successfully awakened his competitive spirit. How irritating. Seeing this, the people above were alarmed. Is Zero crazy? Zero had begun to use his mana method. With an extremely angry expression, a sword stroke grazed his shoulder. Yuri dodged in time. He's facing the third prince. Get a grip. At this point, Zero's eyes had gone white with rage, his brows furrowed in indignation. Suddenly, a few strands of Yuri's hair fell. The last sword stroke had injured his forehead. Zero was extremely worried. Prince, everyone else was just as panicked. You madman. Prince, are you alright? Yuri waved his hand. I'm fine. Is this your first time in a sparring match? But your wound. Yuri wrapped a cloth around the wound. Zero picked up his sword. Again. He raised his sword again. Now it's getting interesting. Then, Yuri took the offensive. There's no reason to stop. He lifted his foot and accelerated. His body moved fluidly, nimbly, ceaselessly. Watching Yuri, Zero thought, this prince is different from me. He was trying to dodge attacks that pushed his limits. No, Zero realized. He is pushing himself. He observed him intently as the two faced off, pushing beyond his own limits. Zero knew. The two faced off in a tense standoff. Zero suddenly panicked. It feels like the blood in my veins is boiling. He charged directly. I've never felt like this before, not even when sparring with opponents stronger than me. Yuri raised his sword to block a blow. His gaze was serious. But this young prince, Yuri pushed off, smiled, and leaped high into the air. Then a horizontal slash. Zero quickly dodged. Is awakening something inside me. Yuri's slash sent a few of his hairs flying. Damn it! Zero gripped his sword tightly. He once again used his mana method and attacked him. Yuri's sword began to crack, and finally it broke in two. Zero had shattered his wooden sword, unable to fight on. At this, Yuri let out a sigh. He looked at Zero and smiled cheerfully. It's over. He slowly retracted his mana, panting with exhaustion. Yuri held his hand out to him. I just realized something, Zero. He took his hand. Oh no, good job. But inside, Zero was in turmoil. That was an intense will and perseverance that I've never experienced before. How can such a young prince? Just then, Yuri was looking at him quizzically. He spoke up. What are you doing? This flustered him. Yuri grinned triumphantly. What are you doing? Why are you holding my hand? Zero hastily let go under his question. You made the prince's head bleed, and now you're just standing there doing nothing? I'm sorry. And then he immediately ran off. Yuri, behind him, sighed. It was just a slip-up. He flopped onto the ground, exhausted. Suddenly, a loud cheer erupted, making Yuri's eyes fly open in surprise. The crowd cheered wildly. Prince, you were amazing. Just then, a person appeared beside Raso. Raso wondered, Captain, when did you arrive? He replied, I just got here a moment ago. Below, Yuri was still resting on the ground. And this was the captain of the Bryan Royal Guard, Shin. He stroked his chin, observing Yuri intently. Time passed in a flash. A few days later, Zero was walking in the palace corridor. A voice spoke up, making him jump. Your shift is over, right? It was Yuri, who had also appeared there. The third prince. He smirked. Yuri walked ahead. Follow me. We have somewhere to be today. Zero hesitated. I still need to practice. He turned his head and glanced at him. It seems your head is clear again. That's all thanks to me, so you owe me a favor. And so, he had to agree. All right, good. Yuri smiled, satisfied. He's putting his all into his body. He's still lacking, but for now, this is enough. Zero spoke up, wondering, but where are we going? Just be quiet and follow me. He chuckled. If it's something dangerous, don't worry. I'll help you. He'll bring another person along. Zero confused. Who? Yuri raised his hand to call someone over. He shouted towards a certain young man. Hey, Ernandol, Royal Major Brian. The man turned his head to look at him. Ernandol awkwardly scratched his head. Is something the matter, Prince? Yuri looked at him and made an offer. We have something to do. Help me out. Ernandol politely declined. I would very much like to go with you, Your Highness, but I have some urgent matters to attend to. But a single sentence from the prince made him freeze. I'll clear your gambling debt. His eyes lit up like car headlights. He changed his tune in a flash. Really? Yep, Yuri cheerfully affirmed. I'll return all the money you lost to me last time. Have you ever seen me lie? Ernandol thought seriously. Outside of casino, he replied no. Yuri beamed. See? But his answer was still no. I mean, I've never seen you leave a casino. This left him speechless. Am I really like that? Then Yuri stepped forward to lead the way for both of them. Anyway, I'm clearing your debt. So stop talking and follow me. Suddenly, Ernandol reached into his pocket. If that's the case, he said, pulling out a piece of paper with a smile. I'd like to get that in writing. This made Yuri's face go completely blank. He slumped, defeated. Are the words of the third prince of Brian really worth so little? Then Yuri pointed straight at Zero. You? Vouch for me. He was completely startled. Yuri repeated. I'm saving you. You should bear witness to the words of Yuri Brian, and to my words as well. Zero helplessly agreed. Understood. Seeing this, Ernandol happily put the paper away. Well then, let's go together, Prince. But where exactly are we going? With a knight from the Royal Guard and a mage? Yuri was silent for a moment. He stopped and turned to face them both. To Sword Mountain. Everyone was stunned. Yuri smirked. From now on, he firmly and clearly declared, we're going to raid our ancestors' dungeon. A short while later, the three of them entered the dungeon. The place had been abandoned for a long time. Ernandol looked around. I had no idea a passage like this existed beneath the palace grounds. Zero, walking ahead, also voiced his question. Prince, what's at the end of this cave? He answered seriously, it leads to Sword Mountain. Sword Mountain, the place where only legends of the founding ancestor remain. Yuri looked down and affirmed, that's right. He recalled, in my previous life, after the Empire conquered Brian, they discovered a hidden dungeon inside Sword Mountain. The hidden artifact found at Sword Mountain was revealed to be the legacy of the founding ancestor of Brian. Back then, they made a huge fuss, saying they had excavated the legacy of the founding ancestor of Brian from it. However, this passage was nothing more than a desperate escape route for me. For that reason, I couldn't even lay a hand on Brian's legacy. It ultimately fell into the hands of the Empire. But now, unlike the past when all I did was run, in this life, I'm taking steps forward, not towards the past, but towards the future. His eyes were resolute. Asterisk, that's right. I'll go and verify it myself. Asterisk, the legacy left behind by our predecessors. The scene outside was a lush, dense forest. Yuri gently pushed the door open and stepped out. The three of them proceeded outside together. Ernan Dole wondered, so are we at Sword Mountain now? He had countless questions. But Prince, where did you get the key to that door? It looks like an artifact. Yuri didn't answer, only thought to himself. It was hidden away in the corner of the study, just like in my previous life. Back then, I paid the price for not knowing its purpose. Not a very pleasant memory. Then he replied, you don't need to know. Suddenly, Ernan Dole got scratched by a thorny vine. Out, Yuri warned, be careful. The leaves here are sharp. Try not to get hurt and just follow me. And so Ernan Dole just stood there dumbfounded, watching him walk ahead. He glanced at Zero. Sir Zero. Yes. Both were bewildered. Did the prince eat something strange? Probably. A loud shout echoed. Are you two coming or not? Both of them jumped. His temper is still the same. Suddenly, Yuri's eyes widened in surprise. He quickly held up a hand behind him as a warning. Hold on a second. Ahead of them was a pack of direwolves. The three of them hid behind a bush, whispering. They move in a pack. There might be even more. How do you know that? Yuri just replied with one sentence. I read it in a book. This made Ernan Dole look like he'd just seen a ghost. A book. The prince. Just then, Yuri stood up and gave instructions. They haven't spotted us yet. Let's just pass by quietly. As soon as he finished speaking, that clumsy oaf Ernan Dole stepped on a branch. All three of them stared blankly at his feet. Ernan Dole gave an embarrassed, forced smile. He managed to get out two words, I'm sore, without noticing a wolf lunging right at him. Zero, seeing this, was extremely worried. Sir Ernan Dole. He slashed through with a single stroke of his sword. The wolf met the blade right across its neck. It collapsed right in front of Ernan Dole. Yuri stood with his arms crossed and praised him. You knew the direwolf's fur is very tough and applied the appropriate mana technique. Well done, Zero. But their leader has its eyes on us now. Indeed, there was a ferocious wolf, mouth agape and drooling, observing the three of them. It tilted its head back and let out a loud howl that echoed through the forest. Immediately, the entire pack surrounded the three of them. Zero gritted his teeth, gripped his sword tightly, and infused it with mana. You two, don't stray too far from me. The wolves, every single one of them, had mouths full of drool. Two were charging quickly towards Zero. He didn't take his eyes off them. And then, Zero took them both down with a single stroke. Ernan Dole, watching from behind, was delighted. You're a great fighter, truly worthy of being the captain of Brian's Royal Guard. Yuri also affirmed, that's right, he's got real skill, but he still has a long way to go. Zero had to fight against many more wolves. By now, his whole body was trembling from exhaustion. And then, Yuri finally spoke up. Ernan Dole. Yes, it seems it's time for you to show off the skills. My father trusted so much. Ernan Dole immediately used his own skills. A fireball was activated. One after another, fireballs were created by Ernan Dole. You know how to utilize a battle mage. Zero, in the middle of fighting, had to turn his head in astonishment. What's happening? A ball of fire was flying straight at him. Zero pulled his sword from a wolf's mouth. He jumped out of the way. Just like that, a huge explosion erupted in the middle of the forest. A short while later, evening had fallen. The three were in another place, separate from the forest. I didn't expect there to be other monsters besides that. Wolf pack. Zero was both tired and angry. That's why we were delayed. But we finally arrived. The summit of Sword Mountain. Everyone was exhausted, standing at the top and observing. Watching Yuri walk off somewhere. Zero asked, Prince, is this really the place? There's absolutely nothing here, let alone a legacy. He shook his head vigorously. It can't be wrong. This is the place. Then Yuri noticed something. But there should be something here. He had seen something red and glowing. Found it. Zero hurried over. Prince. Yuri knelt down and started digging through the dirt. We have to get this thing out. Zero ran up and without turning his head called, Sir Hernando, come help us too. Hernando looked unwilling, but a mage shouldn't injure his hands. A short while later, the three had dug up some kind of item. Yuri picked it up, covered in dirt. It was shaped like a sword. Hernando observed it closely. It doesn't look like it was buried at all. It looks just like a new sword. Yuri suddenly looked down in surprise. On the flat of the blade, 2 words were engraved, Sin. Zero stepped closer, puzzled. So, that's the legacy of the founding ancestor. I'm not so sure anymore. Suddenly, a huge tremor occurred where the 3 were standing. He smiled happily and announced, I guess we'll find out now. The strong tremor caused the ground to crumble. Just like that, the 3 of them began to fall into some deep abyss. The distance they fell seemed very deep. A huge impact erupted. In front of them was a giant green rock. Zero had used his mana energy and held Yuri in his arms to protect his entire body. Even though Zero had used mana, he was still in a lot of pain. Yuri sat up, wondering. He protected his body with a mana technique. Impressive. And during this touching moment, that weasel Hernando appeared, landing easily with his mage abilities. This place is deeper than I thought. Yuri, annoyed, questioned him. Did you just ignore the prince's safety and only worry about yourself? He gave a forced laugh, making an excuse. It was a really urgent situation. Suddenly, a clanking sound came from behind. The alarmed Hernando turned his head to look behind him. Something surrounded by a red aura was approaching. Hernando, terrified, pointed. Prince, over there. But Yuri was still wary of him. If you're trying to change the subject, it's useless. He shouted, no, it's real. There's a ghost. What? Its eyes are glowing red. Watching them. Then Yuri also panicked and turned around. This being advanced step by step towards the 3 of them. Yuri broke out in a sweat, recognizing the figure before him was a death knight. Then he looked over at Zero. Get up. But he was still in great pain, his face pale. Yuri angrily stomped his foot and yelled, I said, get up. Zero was startled awake. He shot up and looked around. Where are we? By now, the Death Knight was right in front of Zero. Despite the pain, he stood protectively in front of the prince. Prince, please step back. I will handle this Death Knight. Yuri thought with admiration. Asterisk, look at this guy. Quick reflexes. Asterisk. A dark red aura emanated from this being. Yuri frowned at it. A Death Knight. Just as the name implies, a knight who has returned from the dead. If a knight dies and becomes a Death Knight, he becomes even stronger than when he was alive. However, he then stepped forward. It's okay. That thing isn't dangerous. But Zero was still worried. How can you be so sure? I just have a feeling. He confidently stepped right up to the Death Knight. There's no way the guardian of our ancestors' dungeon would attack me. Yuri Brian, who shares the same bloodline. Don't you think so? It just looked at him silently. Then it drew the sword at its hip. Seeing this, the 2 behind them were terrified. Prince, be careful. And the sword came at Yuri. It plunged the tip of its sword into the ground, and a few strands of his hair fell. That troublemaker Hernando feigned concern. Oh no, the prince's head has been chopped in 2. Yuri angrily turned around with his new, goofy haircut. You'd better watch your mouth. Hernando corrected himself. The prince's hair has been split in 2. Just then, the Death Knight spoke. That arrogant expression, it's just like his. Yuri wondered whose. It spoke a name that surprised everyone. Eric Bryan. Zero spoke up. Eric Bryan is. Hernando realized. That's a name everyone in Bryan knows. A great swordsman who conquered the entire continent all by himself. He is a sword, and also the founder of Bryan, the kingdom of knights and its first king. Then Yuri placed a hand on his chest. Am I the first person to set foot here? The Death Knight affirmed. Yes. He looked at the sword he had just dug up. If you were not a descendant of Bryan, you would not be able to draw that sword. Yuri picked it up. So this is the peerless, divine sword my ancestor once used. But the Death Knight interjected. I have used it already. This made Yuri seem unable to accept the truth. He looked bewildered, with question marks floating around him. Why that face? Do you scorn it just because I have used it? He turned his face away and replied. I just feel guilty for touching something that belongs to someone else. The Death Knight continued, descendant of Bryan. He became serious. State clearly the reason you are here. He tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. Eric Yuri extended his hand toward the Death Knight. I am Eric Bryan, the 3rd prince of the Bryan dynasty. Now, as the heir of Eric Bryan, transfer his legacy to me. The Death Knight's eyes stared intently at him. Then he turned around. He spoke, "For the time has come. It seems I must begin to carry out my mission." Yuri also listened seriously. "I will grant you what you desire." Immediately, he lifted his foot and stepped forward to follow. Yuri followed closely behind the Death Knight. Zero worried, "This can't be." He glanced aside, thinking to himself, "We've set foot in the dungeon of our ancestor Brian and are talking to a Death Knight. This is not the royal guard life that I had imagined." A call from Yuri cut off Zero's train of thought. "Zero, what are you doing?" Zero, startled, looked at him. Suddenly, his eyes widened in astonishment. An image of Yuri from his past life appeared in his memory. Prince Yuri spoke again. "Aren't you coming?" Zero quickly composed himself. "No way. I'm starting to see all sorts of illusions." Then he too stepped forward. "Here." A moment later, the three of them arrived before a giant green crystal. The Death Knight sat on the stone blocks. Yuri looked towards him. Suddenly, a great pressure emanated from it, along with the voice of the Death Knight. "I hope that you will be worthy." And then Yuri was transported to a desolate desert. He was all alone here. "Where am I?" Suddenly, a figure appeared from a distance. Yuri voiced his question, "Are you my ancestor?" He suddenly realized with a start, "No, wait, that's..." It had already taken a ready attack stance. This thing rushed towards him. "That's not human." Yuri quickly blocked a blow with his sword. Looking inside it, at its heart was a source of blue magic. Yuri, shocked, came to realization. Looking at the faceless puppet with the blue glowing sword. This is a mana method. It suddenly pointed to a glowing spot on its body. Yuri furrowed his brow, confused, not knowing what this thing was trying to say. It held a sword in one hand and raised the other. Then, the blue mana stream appeared, enveloping the sword. Yuri took a fighting stance, a method for utilizing mana. "It's showing me its basic principles." Then it pointed at the sword and at him. Yuri wondered, "You want me to copy it? Right in the middle of a battle?" He scratched his head helplessly. "My ancestor is a real lunatic." Looking at the mannequin, Yuri thought to himself, training someone who has never learned a mana method by throwing them straight into a real fight. He covered his face with his hand. This could only happen to someone living their second life. Then Yuri sat down and placed his hand on the ground, just like it had. A blue aura flickered from his hand. This surprised him quite a bit. "So it's like this?" Then Yuri shouted, "Hey," loudly. He gave it a wry smile. "I still haven't grasped any of the serious techniques." Hearing this, the puppet person seemed amused and smiled brightly. Facing it, Yuri silently made a resolve. "I must become stronger." He pointed his sword forward, "because it won't be long before the Empire reveals its ambitions and invades Brian." Remembering that scene, "I will do everything to destroy them. I will not repeat that mistake again." Yuri firmly gripped the sword, which was radiating mana. The swordsmanship of Eric Brian. Just like that, he sped up, flying forward, his gaze sharp. He raised his sword and leaped high. Yuri swung his sword in a single arc and declared, "I will make it my own." Scene changes to another location. This person groggily opened his eyes. This place is a training room with various weapons. Zero had been brought here. He frowned in confusion. Looking around, Zero realized, "Is this a training room?" He looked from side to side, looking at his singed hair. Zero sighed. That wasn't a dream. Then he assumed an attack stance, turned, and called out, "Where are you hiding? Come out and fight me." A figure suddenly appeared behind him. Zero, on guard, immediately noticed. He whipped around and gave a forced smile. This person looked exactly like him. A doppelganger. "Is this the Death Knight's trial?" he asked seriously. "What's your name? Is it also Zero?" It smiled sinisterly. "Zero, do not fight your destiny." He frowned, a little worried. "What?" The fake Zero continued his brainwashing. "Didn't you join the Royal Guard because you wanted a peaceful life?" It wouldn't stop rambling. "Stay away from the third prince. You will only bring misfortune upon yourself if you defy fate." At this, he sighed. The real Zero looked at the sword in his hand. If it were the me of back then, I would have agreed with him. But then he remembered the image of sparring with Yuri. At that time, he asked him a question. "Don't you find it boring? This all feels like a play." Then, the real Zero bared his teeth in a triumphant grin. "You wouldn't understand. Because you're just a fake." The fake was silenced, listening to him speak. "What you've done cannot be undone." In thinking about your next move, it suddenly drew its sword while the real Zero was talking. "Will only distract your mind." The fake Zero, using mana, replied, "Wrong answer." Then it quickly leaped into the air. Its eyes were cold as it rushed towards him, but its attack was easily blocked by the real Zero. He looked at it and sighed inwardly. Such a predictable move. Both of them, real and fake, trembled. A sword style that heavily relies on defense, unwilling to take any risks. Two identical swords clashed. The me of the past truly was. At this, the fake. Zero jumped back. The real Zero curled his lip in a smile and uttered one word. Boring. Then he gritted his teeth and lunged. A single sword stroke slashed across its body. Just die. Instantly, the fake was struck down by him, sprawling on the ground. Suddenly, the gash he had made on its body was leaking a certain substance. Zero, astonished, stared at it with wide eyes. Something began to mutate with a slimy fluid. Of course, there has to be a second phase. A moment later, it had transformed into a giant creature, 100 times larger than Zero. He furrowed his brow, calculating. Its size is truly overwhelming. The prince must be fighting somewhere as well. Zero, with serious determination, assumed a fighting stance. Please, your highness, overcome this. Returning to where Yuri was fighting, the rocks here had been scratched by sword strikes. At this moment, Yuri had been beaten and was kneeling by a damaged boulder. His body was covered in battle wounds. This puppet, however, was completely unharmed and still raised its sword high, wanting to attack. It leaped up as if preparing to finish him off. Yuri suddenly grabbed his sword, gripping it tightly with all his strength. Then, with renewed determination, he charged forward, not giving up. A fierce slash struck the mannequin's body. Just like that, a huge explosion occurred, shattering the ground. But the puppet still dodged and leaped back. Yuri sighed. I don't know how much time has passed. Remembering just now, he sighed to himself, just now, was truly a dangerous place. The question is, how should I use this mana method? This way. And also, how should I swing my sword? Thanks to the continuous fighting. He looked at the mana-infused sword in his hand. I think it's finally starting to stabilize a bit. Then suddenly something caught his attention. Cracks began to appear on the mannequin's sword. And then it shattered into many pieces before him. It began to fade away, and didn't forget to wave goodbye to him. Yuri smiled and sighed. So, time must be up. He closed his eyes with a satisfied smile. Thank you. Then he too disappeared from the strange place. A moment later, Yuri reappeared in the old cave. The head, and Zero were also here. I'm back. Sir Zero, are you alright? Yes, I'm fine. The Death Knight, still sitting there, spoke up. It seems you've just had a pleasant dream. Yuri wondered. What was that just now? He stood up and explained. That was the test of Eric, something he left for the heir of Brian, the one who would one day set foot in this place. Yuri thought to himself, in my past life, Sword Mountain was brutally ravaged by the Empire. Because of that, no one from the Brian clan could set foot in that place. Then he looked at him and asked a question. Could it be that our ancestor also used this mana method? The Death Knight's answer was no. He revealed Eric only achieved it in his final years, while traveling to the Eastern lands. It is his final legacy, created from all the enlightenment he accumulated, and you are the first heir. And so, one asked and the other answered, why was it passed down to me in this way, instead of being given to the royal family? The Death Knight replied, this dungeon will not open until the time is right. When it opens, it means the time to use that power has come. What is this time you speak of? That is not something I can answer. You must find out for yourself. After that, Yuri stared intently at the sword in his hand. A mana aura was radiating from it. He wondered, what is the name of this mana method? He called it Soul Slash. He seriously repeated its name. Soul Slash. Suddenly, the Death Knight requested, Yuri Brian, kneel on one knee. I shall bestow the legacy of the ancestor upon the heir of Brian. Yuri immediately did as he was told. The Death Knight placed a hand on his head. Do not fear your enemies. He closed his eyes and obeyed. Yes, he continued, act according to your beliefs. Yes. Suddenly, the Death Knight's body began to fade away until the very end. Fulfill your duty as one who carries the Brian bloodline. Yes. Abruptly, he gripped his hair tightly. This made Yuri open his eyes to look at him. Engrave this in your heart. The Death Knight completely faded away. The people of Brian never abandoned their honor, even in death. That is the vow of the Brian clan. Yuri did not take his eyes off of him. A red glint suddenly appeared in his eyes. Cut to the royal palace. At this moment, Aina was opening the curtains in Prince Yuri's room. It's morning. He sat up wearily, covering his eyes as if he didn't want to get up. Aina looked at him with concern, her hand on her hip. Are you tired? You came back very late last night. You look as though you could fall asleep the moment your head hits the pillow. Yuri said helplessly, Sorry. Then he stretched and yawned, replying, I dropped by the royal library for a bit last night. Why go to the library all of a sudden? Because I needed to find a record. According to the records found in the library, about the imperial bloodline. In the past, the royal family had a record stating that the founding ancestor, Eric Bryan, had a brother, a figure who vanished from the flow of history, unable to leave a name behind because he had cast away his honor. He gazed into the distance, thinking to himself, he must be that Death Knight. The sword from yesterday was placed in his room, and he was the original owner of that sword. Just then, Aina called out, Prince, you must change your clothes quickly, Your Highness. His Majesty is looking for you. Yuri got out of bed, wondering why. She happily handed him his clothes and replied, I'm not sure, but after he met with Sir Handan, he requested your immediate presence. Yuri squeezed his eyes shut, thinking with a sigh, Handan, that guy. He recalled when the three of them were leaving. Handan had said, Prince. He said seriously, I will report what happened today to His Majesty. Yuri whipped his head around. Do you really have to do that? Handan gave a broad smile. Yes, because I feel it is my duty. Yuri rubbed his head, feeling helpless. It seems he's reported everything. A moment later, in the palace hall, Yuri stood before Fio. Father, you sent for me. He immediately replied, Yes, I've heard from Handan. Not only did you leave the palace without permission yesterday, but you also found our ancestors' dungeon at Swordmount. Yes. He nervously avoided his father's gaze. That is what happened. The king slowly sat up. You also found the sword in the dungeon? Yes. Fio took a step forward, then another, closing the distance to Yuri. I hear you've changed a lot. Fio's expression was incredibly serious. From your handmaiden, Bernard Shin, and even Handan said so. He placed a hand on his son's head. Tell me what caused you to change. Sweat trickled down Yuri's cheek. He gripped the sword at his hip tightly. Then, he was seen taking a step back. Fio was puzzled. You don't want to talk? Yuri closed his eyes. That's not it. Then why did you step back with that expression? Then he explained, It's because you were clenching your fist, father. At that, he relaxed his hand. Is that so? Then Fio looked at him. Well then, you can speak now. Yuri began. I had a dream. His father was surprised. A dream? He continued to reveal, yes, and in that dream, I committed a grave sin. Fio listened seriously to his son's words. A grave sin? He asked him a direct question. Yuri Bryan, what was the sin you committed in that dream? Yuri bowed his head and answered softly. My sin was failing to save Bryan. He recounted his past life under the guise of a dream. In my dream, Bryan was caught in a great war, and countless innocent people fell. I tried to save it, but I failed. The kingdom collapsed. So I fled in disgrace and died a miserable death. Yuri placed a hand on his chest. When I woke up from the dream, the necklace that mother gave me had also disappeared. I thought, he said seriously, that perhaps the dream was a warning from mother. Fio still had more questions. So what destroyed the kingdom in that dream? Yuri looked at him anxiously. That is, he thought to himself, it's too soon to mention the empire. Besides, there's a chance the invasion won't happen, since I'm changing the past. So he refused to disclose it. I'm not sure either. It was a dark army that I had never seen before. After hearing this, his father suddenly smiled happily. Placing his hands on his hips, he said, I see. It might just be a fleeting nightmare, or it could be a warning from Lily. But what relieves me is that you've learned to pull yourself together. This statement from his father left him wondering, have I really done that? I'm just trying to struggle for forgiveness for my sins. Suddenly, his father spoke again. There is one thing we need to clarify. Fio's expression was extremely resolute. Bring me your sword. A genius who held a sword as soon as he could walk. A man who bore every title with the word first. He had carved his name onto this continent with his transcendent swordsmanship. Yuri stood facing him. The 10 Greats is the title for the strongest on the continent, and he was considered the strongest among them. Simply put, the strongest swordsman on the continent, a man no one could take lightly. Then he glanced away. This is the first time I've entered your training room, father. Fio's voice lowered. I never thought that any of my sons had a talent for swordsmanship. Yuri made an excuse. I guess I'm the exception. His father let out a helpless sigh. Talent. Suddenly, Fio pointed his sword at him. To his alarm, his father posed a question. What is talent to a swordsman? He looked at him with intense pressure. Strength, speed, reflexes, or outstanding intellect. The sword tip remained pointed. If you possessed all of that, could you become the strongest knight? And Fio answered his own question with certainty. No. This startled Yuri, who looked up at him. Fio held the sword before his eyes. More important than anything that appears on the surface is the thing that can make you surpass the limits of a human. His eyes were sharp as ice, something that transcends even a sense of duty or crisis. Then he opened them wide, looking at his son with great authority. Yuri was stunned by that pressure. Wait, a red aura was enveloping his father. The aura around father has changed. Then Theo sheathed his sword. I don't know what to call this thing. Then the aura vanished. It's like hearing the call of the sword. Yuri stared at him in astonishment. He gripped his sword defensively, and then voiced his question like destiny. His father nodded. Perhaps. That could be. Yuri fell silent, looking down thoughtfully, but his heart was in turmoil. In my past life, I was not meant to walk the path of the sword. And now? Theo asked again, what do you think, son? He stepped closer to him. Theo offered, should you take up this sword? Yuri was lost in thought amidst his father's words. Do you hear the sword calling you? When death is near, will you still continue? Will you still continue to grip the sword? Yuri shook his head resolutely. I don't. He looked up at his father anxiously. Feel anything at all? After these words, Theo suddenly became as terrifying as a demon. This directly caused Yuri to stumble back in fear. Father! Suddenly, he felt as if countless demonic red eyes were observing him. Yuri looked around in terror. The desperate screams of people rang out. No! Run, Prince! Get out of here! Help! Prince Yuri! And he suddenly opened his eyes wide. Before his eyes was a scene from the past. The palace was once again engulfed in a sea of fire. The massacre was still ongoing. Yuri stood frozen on the spot, not understanding the situation. Suddenly, he snapped awake, utterly stunned. What? Yuri looked around. Why is Brian engulfed in flames like this? Familiar calls suddenly rang out. The third prince is over there. The last prince of Brian is here. The soldiers of the Empire were advancing step by step. He dazedly recognized the Imperial army. Yuri stared at his hands in horror. Wait, is this? He asked himself. Have I returned? He once again had to face that catastrophic scene. Back to the moment of Brian's fall. All around was engulfed in a raging sea of fire. Yuri stood dumbfounded. What is this? A soldier lunged from behind him. Die, Prince of Brian. Yuri gritted his teeth and spun around. He raised his sword and blocked the surprise attack. Yuri frowned at him. Then, a single sword stroke sent the man to his ancestors. Worried voices rang out. Prince will hold them off. In the meantime, please, you must run. Brian's army stood defending in front of him. Prince, please run. Each one of them was fighting desperately. But Yuri, at this moment, still couldn't believe it. Is this all just a dream? Despair filled his heart. Was Brian ultimately destined to fall in vain? Yuri's face darkened. I can't stop it. Once again, he was facing the army of the Empire. Yuri gripped the sword in his hand tightly. This was a sword he hadn't owned in his previous life, but a horde of ferocious soldiers charged. A look of determination shone in Yuri's eyes. I swore that I would never fear the enemy. The image and words of the Death Knight echoed in his mind. Act on what you believe in, until the very end. Fulfill your duty as one who bears the Brian name. And so, Yuri advanced, using the decisive mana technique. Each of his slashes felled several soldiers, who collapsed in pools of blood. Blood splattered onto Yuri's face, forcing him to squint. A spear flew towards him. Yuri reacted quickly and parried it. He raised his sword and thrust it through the center of his attacker's head. His blade was now completely red with blood. Yuri panted, exhausted. One after another, they kept coming. Prince of Brian, you're dead for sure now. So just give up. He gritted his teeth. A man of Brian. Yuri got into a ready stance. Does not abandon his honor, even in death. He gathered his strength and leaped high. To the very end, somehow, he was now above the soldiers. Fulfill your duty as one who bears the Brian name. Just then, the scene suddenly shifted back to the past, to where Yuri had been talking with his father. He was still lost in the hallucination. To the very end, Theo began to speak, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Yuri, can you hear my voice? Yuri. His father's loud call suddenly snapped him out of it. Father! But it seemed he still hadn't adjusted as he trembled. The army. Yuri glanced around. The dark army. His father reassured him. Yuri, calm down. You saw an illusion. Only then did Yuri realize. So, his hand was still trembling uncontrollably. It was just an illusion. Theo watched him in silence, then let out a sigh. It seems I was mistaken. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Yuri, perhaps this sword should be kept by you. Hearing this, Yuri smiled faintly, satisfied. He replied happily, "Yes, that is my decision." But Theo looked very worried for him. Seeing this, Yuri thought helplessly, why is he making that face all of a sudden? Anyone seeing this might think I'm about to become a corpse. So he reached a hand toward his father. Yuri cheerfully patted his father's back. "Don't worry, father." He pointed confidently at himself. "You know me, I'm a genius." At that, Theo cracked a smile, and his fist slowly began to rise. You don't need to guess to know that a sky-shattering scream was heard once again. Scene changed to Yuri's training ground. Bernard turned around in surprise. Yuri walked over with a swollen bump on his head. "Prince." He looked at him, puzzled. "Whose masterpiece is this today?" He dodged the question. "Father's," Bernard remarked. "It seems His Majesty used a bit of force today, but I won't lower the difficulty of your training just because of that." Yuri scratched his head. "I know." His eyes were resolute. "Come to think of it, Bernard is the one who stayed in Brian because of father." Then he spoke up, asking Bernard, "Your condition for staying in Brian was a duel, wasn't it? You won't duel my father, right?" "Yes, that's right." Yuri crossed his arms. "So if I tell you to stay, you'll still stay, won't you? Even if you can't duel my father?" He looked at him seriously, then burst out laughing. "No." This made Yuri think helplessly. "Damn you." Still as heartless as ever. Then Bernard smiled. "It seems the prince wants me to stay." Bernard stroked his chin, feigning thought. "I will stay, if you show me something that can convince me. For example," he stated a condition, "the swordsmanship of ancestor Eric." Hearing this, Yuri was confused. "You want me to teach you our ancestors' swordsmanship?" Bernard nodded with interest. "I've started taking interest in it." Yuri stammered, "I'm sorry, but that will be very difficult." He thought to himself, "Well, that's understandable. It's called the Phantom Sword, after all." Then Bernard said cheerfully, "It's fine even if you haven't completely mastered it. That's something I already took into account." Yuri slowly drew his sword. "You're right, but what I mean is that it will be of no use to you." He pointed his sword forward while using his mana. This swordsmanship is one and the same with its mana method. Bernard watched seriously. The two are one. This is the first time I've heard of such a thing. Normally, the mana method is used to enhance swordsmanship. Then Yuri closed his eyes, sensing, and then replied, "That's right. That's why I said passing it on to you would be difficult. And in any case, it would never be complete." Bernard looked at him, thought for a moment, then agreed. "All right then." This surprised Yuri. "Really?" Bernard placed a hand on his chest. "Even an incomplete swordsmanship is fine. In return, I will stay in Brian," he stated with certainty. "Even if it's just half of it, there will surely be parts one can understand." Yuri marveled internally. What insane confidence. He also smiled happily. Then he asked, "All right, so you'll stay in Brian as promised, right?" "Yes, Your Highness." Then Bernard took a few steps away from him. Then he pointed his sword at him. "Can you demonstrate it?" Yuri immediately agreed. "All right, I will show you the soul slayer of Yuri Brian." Suddenly, Bernard spoke up again. "There's one thing I haven't told you. Actually, I intended to stay in Brian from the very beginning. His Majesty said we should stick together for another 15 years. This made Yuri feel as if a bucket of cold water had been dumped on him. He was so indignant. "What? So you're saying?" But Bernard immediately changed the subject, not letting him say anything more. "Aren't you going to attack?" He took a stance. "Then I'll make the first move." Yuri was extremely pissed off. "Why you?" Then, filled with anger, he also sped up and leaped forward. Yuri charged forward to attack. "You wait until now to tell me." In a flash, it was afternoon. Now he was lying in bed, thinking. A spark appeared in Yuri's eyes. "It's changing into a different future. A Brian that isn't destroyed by my mistakes, even though no special measures were taken." Bernard's decision to stay in Brian is proof of that. He cheerfully raised his hand. Changing the future was once a vague and uncertain thing. But even if it's just little by little, it is definitely changing. But then he frowned. "It's not over yet. This time, I have to stop the M-dash. Peer," Yuri resolved at all costs. Suddenly, a voice chimed in agreement. "Yes, you absolutely must." Yuri glanced sideways, bewildered. It was Aina. She looked worried. "You absolutely must not cause trouble this time." Yuri sat up. "Is there something else on the schedule?" "You cause trouble all the time. So you don't even know what I'm talking about, do you?" She sighed helplessly. "Tomorrow, you have to attend a meeting." "That's why I said that." "A meeting?" "Yes, the Council of Elders meeting." Yuri was surprised as Aina spoke. "His Majesty said you will also participate this time." "You haven't heard yet?" Yuri scratched his head in confusion. Damn, she continued to instruct him. You must set out first thing tomorrow morning. I heard that most of the Council of Elders will be attending. Suddenly, Aina gripped his hand tightly. She pleaded with sparkling eyes. There will be some scary and stubborn people, but you absolutely must not pick a fight or do anything like that. Yuri gave a strained smile to reassure her. Is that what you're worried about? Don't worry, I don't do that anymore. Hearing that, Aina reminded him again. Really? Promise me. I already said so. You don't need to worry. The next morning at the Bryan Palace, everyone was gathered at a table. Suddenly, a hand slammed down on the table. No! Yuri sat there, observing cautiously, and thought to himself, Aina was right, opposing it right from the start. This person is Duke Genet. He spoke aggressively. It is not right for the prince to learn a mana method that has not been verified. Everyone around listened seriously. Yuri was still lost in thought. And the members of the Council of Elders. This is supposed to be a place to discuss the kingdom's administration, but now, it has long since become a place for them to aim for the throne. Now I understand why my father never attended it before. Duke Genet placed a hand on his chest. You should be learning the Bryan method, rather than wasting time learning things like that. Another person retorted, What do you mean? Unverified method? This is our ancestors' legacy. He said arrogantly. How can you be so sure it's the ancestors' legacy? Are you doubting the prince? Old Genet looked at him with a despicable expression. But I mean, it's better to be careful. Aren't we gathered here because we are worried about the prince's future? At this, Yuri confidently crossed his arms. You even convened a Council of Elders meeting just to discuss my mana method. I'm deeply moved, Duke Genet. He scoffed internally, truly shameless. A traitor who bowed his head to the emperor as soon as Bryan fell. He's as glib-tongued as ever. Then the man turned to someone else. Sir Shin, what do you think? The captain of Bryan's royal guard. Shin was flustered, not knowing how to answer. He clasped his hands, sweating. I'm not qualified to make a judgment arbitrarily. Shin replied anxiously. Each mana method has its own strengths and weaknesses, and each person also has different characteristics. At this, Genet shot to his feet. See, he said aggressively. The very captain of Bryan's royal guard says that he is not certain about this mana method. Nothing could be more unsettling. Then he shook his head in dismay. I think it's best to abandon a mana method. Like that. Another person interjected. What Sir Shin is saying doesn't mean he's uncertain. He means to say that every mana method has its own value. An ally of the Duke stood up and retorted sharply. It's still the same thing. The Duke is just worried that the mana method could harm the prince. Yuri, who had been silent until now, just observed them. Look at these people. He frowned. This is bad. Voices of agreement rang out. I think so too. I agree. The situation has completely turned. If I hadn't been learning the method for long, it would still be possible to completely change the operation of my core. But because of the combat experience in the ancestors' illusion, the Soul Slayer has taken deep root in my core. I can't even explain all of this. What should I do? While Yuri was in a bind, suddenly another opinion was heard. You certainly know how to persuade. Yuri was immediately surprised and paid attention to this person. Sunlight shone on him, making him look like a savior. He raised his hand. Excuse me, I would like to say something. This person was Lord Cancio Irancia. He posed a question. Among all of you here, how many have actually faced an orc? People started whispering. Duke Genet spoke up. Who are you? What is your title? He respectfully stood up and introduced himself. My name is Cancio Irancia. I am a free lord. The old man began to show contempt. A baron, a lowly person like you, dares to attend the Council of Elders meeting? I didn't want to come either. He laughed helplessly. But what can I do? His eyes were sharp. Marquis Sedan entrusted this to me. Yuri was startled. Marquis Sedan? He is surely the Marquis who defends the Bryan border. True to that title. He is the lord who guards the border, meaning the front lines, and is famous for being a true warrior, who has spent his whole life on the battlefield. Yuri observed him intently. He's known for being completely uninterested in the affairs of the nobility. So what made him send someone to the Council of Elders? Someone wondered aloud. What happened that made Marquis Sedan send someone to the council? He isn't the type to explain things in detail. Cancio replied cheerfully. Seeing the high-ranking nobles here just obsessed with power struggles, immersed in meaningless debates. I think now I understand why the Marquis sent me. He was very direct. the type of mana method, doesn't actually make much of a difference on a battlefield. In fact, whether it's the Brian method or the Empire's mind art, in the end, it all depends on the one who wields it. And then Kanshio extended a hand towards Yuri. Your Highness, what do you think? Yuri exclaimed internally, I like this guy. Then he replied, as the Prince of Brian, I don't understand why there has to be a debate about me training with the mana method of my ancestors. No matter what anyone says, I will still learn my ancestors' mana method. Kanshio cheerfully continued. Now, the instincts of the sword-wielding prince have decided to follow the will of his ancestor and that mana method. So why are those who are unrelated, have no authority, and bear no responsibility, butting in and making a fuss? He spoke relentlessly with sharp logic. Usually the desk jockeys, who have never even swung a sword in their lives, are the loudest ones like this. Duke Genet, who had been thoroughly roasted, angrily shouted at the free Lord, you're speaking nonsense. Kanshio smiled brightly. Forgive me. If I was impolite, I beg your pardon. I couldn't help it, because I have to fight orcs every day, out on the border. The whole room was silent. Only his voice could be heard. I've mentioned it before, but can you tell me, among those present here, how many have actually fought an orc? His words left the dukes speechless. Do you think those orcs care what kind of mana method their opponent uses? One of them sighed and replied, you're not wrong. But even so, the prince is still young. So his judgment. Are you saying I should tear apart and rework my entire mana method? Yuri frowned. Just because I made one wrong decision? If it's necessary, the noble said sternly. You say that while knowing full well it's impossible, right? Kanshio chimed in. In any case, it doesn't seem like the prince is going to back down. Or are you planning to forcibly extract his mana core or something? He shouted angrily. Kanshio remained calm. I don't think you do that. So arguing now is pointless. He cheerfully looked at the prince. The prince agrees as well, right? But everyone is just sitting here damaging the prince's mental health. Duke Genet was so angry he gritted his teeth. It seems the royal palace is truly a leisurely place. So peaceful, huh? He slammed the table and shouted loudly. Peaceful? What did you say? How disrespectful. If you say so, then hasn't the Marquis been quiet lately as well? After receiving that budget, Cassio put on a fearsome expression. Do hundreds of people have to die for it to be considered not quiet? Surely you haven't seen or heard the reports about the soldiers falling every day. On the very day I left the Marquis' territory, 4 people died. I even personally covered a comrade with a shroud, someone I had breakfast with, and talked with until dawn. Those orcs never rest, my lord noble. They spend their entire lives fighting and slaughter. At this, the crowd fell silent, not daring to utter a word. Yuri, on the other hand, thought to himself, the orcs, come to think of it. Around this time, there was a problem between Brian and the Duchy of Glen. Back then, the orcs continuously crossed the border, causing severe damage. Has there been any change in the orcs' actions? That's right. They become much more suspicious and grim than usual. Suddenly, Yuri spoke up, startling Cassio. I see. What about the situation on the Glen side? Yuri looked at him seriously. Aren't the Duchy of Glen's troops also stationed there? A worried Cassio replied, about that. Their border defense forces suddenly withdrew. What about the border village on their side? A devastating scene appeared. It was completely destroyed. The populace was killed, taken as slaves. The situation is extremely dire. He closed his eyes tightly, pondering. The timing coincides perfectly. Is it a civil war? Or, Yuri posed the question, is the Duke's third son behind all this? Duke Genet looked at him, speechless and confused. Yuri was startled, realizing he'd said too much. He shot up to his feet, making an excuse. I think that's enough for today. The Duke gave a fake laugh. Enough? Prince. Yuri opened the door and walked out. Let's discuss bigger issues than my petty mana method. Note the dialogue, like defending against the Duchy of Glen and the orcs. For instance, the old man was furious, his face scrunched up. Stop worrying about the affairs of the pubescent boy. The day was turning to dusk. The moon was rising over a house. Inside, someone appeared in a blue crystal ball. I see. So the third prince said that. Yes. While Cassio was in the room, he stroked his chin and spoke to the person in the orb. The rumors are spreading that he's completely different from who he used to be. The man asked, what do you think of him? Recalling Yuri's serious expression back then, when he had asked the question, aren't the Duchy of Glen's troops also stationed there? Cassio suddenly smirked in amusement. He looked into the orb and replied, his eyes. The man also seemed pleased and interested. We'll need to keep an eye on him. Cassio, investigate the third prince. Cassio wondered, but on the surface, there's nothing remarkable about him. Should I conduct a background check? If necessary, do it. Then Cassio pushed himself up. Then I'll get right on it. The man in the orb also said goodbye. I will contact you later. And then the orb returned to normal. Just a gray color. Cassio looked down through the window and sighed. How peaceful. Even though soldiers at the border are falling every day. Suddenly, he noticed a hooded figure. Cassio quickly realized he looked somewhat familiar. The third prince. He frowned, wondering what he was doing here. Then he denied it to himself. Of course not. But it was indeed Yuri. He had even brought Wu along. I've snuck out of the palace as you requested. But my heart is pounding. When I was young, I used to sneak out of the house all the time. Yuri wondered, you mean like 3 times a day, like your 3 meals? Wu looked around. Something like that. I used to be a rebellious teenager. Wu whispered to him like a child. That little girl is staring at us. Do you think she's recognized who I am? Yuri sneered. Why do you seem so excited? You can leave the palace whenever you want. Then Wu giggled. If it's just me, it's called a stroll. But going with you, it feels like we're staging a rebellion. So, what are you planning to do now? Something mischievous, perhaps? Yuri turned his head. That's not going to happen. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't do it with you here. Hearing that, he feigned sadness. My apologies. That's very disappointing to hear. Then Wu wondered. But Prince, where are we going now? A happy Yuri held up a gold casino coin. We're going to the most illegal casino in the capital. A confused Wu pictured gambling dice. Huh? Wait a minute. You just said we weren't going to do anything bad. But Yuri glanced at him, and we're not. So just take me there. You can't say you don't know the place, right? He laughed and replied, whenever I get drunk, instead of going home, I go there. But Yuri quickly cut him off, Wu. He warned in a low voice. Let me say this first. This is all for Brian. This surprised him a little. Don't tell me you're secretly thinking. Just how much has he prepared? As expected, he's calculated everything in advance. And then, Wu, happy as a puppy, skipped and hummed through the street. All right, Prince. Tonight, let's turn that casino upside down. Yuri then recalled his past life. Among the people of Brian, there were a few who caused a stir throughout the land. The mob boss who once ruled the underworld, and the infamous loan shark. They were giants of the commercial world, at the top of the entire continent. And the other one was the one who beheaded the notorious mob bosses of the underworld and filled the streets of Brian with fear. She was an unusual assassin. His gaze was fixed ahead, and the one she killed was... At this point, the two had arrived at a place, with many people in front of them. Yuri thought, this man right here, the best loan shark of our time. This wretched-looking fellow is named Goryo. He looked at Yuri with a vile smile. I never expected a nobleman, such as yourself, to have business with us. It's such an honor. Yuri smiled smugly, crossing his arms. It seems you already know who I am. Hearing this, Wu beside him looked bewildered. What? Goryo gave a fake smile. Of course. The king's mage and the third prince personally wish to see us. Even with limited power, don't you still need someone to take responsibility? His expression changed. That's a sound judgment. I didn't come here just to gamble or have fun. He laughed with delight, looking at him like prey. Then he gestured for them to enter. Well then, shall we sit and talk? Wu, sitting next to Yuri, was extremely panicked and whispered in his ear, Prince, you said you wouldn't gamble, and you never mentioned anything about this to me. Yuri looked helplessly at this 1.8-meter-tall nuisance. Be quiet. And then Goryo sat down opposite the two. I hear you didn't come here to gamble. So, could it be you're here to borrow money? Yuri confirmed. That's right. I plan to use the borrowed money as an investment, meaning you're planning to set up your own slush fund. Hearing this, Goryo smiled slyly. And since you're borrowing from me, and not from a bank, does the third prince harbor greater ambitions? Suddenly Yuri spoke up. Stop it. He looked at the man and declared, interrogating me is not your job. The man immediately made an excuse. My apologies for that. I wish to offer my apologies. Yuri shook his head. It's fine. After all, I'm the one who needs money. In that case, can you get straight to the point and specify what the money will be used for? Yuri revealed. I will use the borrowed money to acquire Magranza, Glenn's land of spices, because sooner or later, the supply will not be enough to meet the demand. Hearing this, Wu was extremely alarmed. Prince, are you planning to Goryo stroked his beard and replied, Mugranza, it is indeed an essential region for producing high-end spices, but I still have doubts whether it's worth investing such a huge sum in it. Yuri seriously affirmed, it will happen soon. He and Wu then looked at him and thought, I also heard that in the Duchy of Glen, war has broken out, and orcs are roaming everywhere. But I don't think spice prices could rise that much. His eyes widened. Could it be that His Highness simply wants to monopolize the regional specialty? One step ahead, Goryo was carefully observing Yuri. That gaze, he frowned. Prince O'Brien, you are far different from the circulating rumors. Moreover, it seems, you are acting on information far beyond what has been revealed. Suddenly, Yuri cheerfully said, now let's decide on the amount. As an investor, not a prince, how much can you lend me? He slammed the table with a loud thud. Goryo looked at him with a cunning expression. Please sign this loan agreement. Seeing this, Yuri smiled with satisfaction. A moment later, he was outside, holding the piece of paper. He and Wu, trotting behind him, couldn't help but wonder, did Goryo really lend you money? And a huge amount at that. But this is too much, Prince. Yuri looked up at him and just said, making he and Wu sulk. You should have at least given me a heads up. You never intended to gamble from the start, right? But Yuri had already thought it all through. If I had told you the truth, wouldn't you have dragged me straight to father? Then the two continued walking. Are we going to the trading post now? Yes, we have something we want them to do. He thought to himself. Actually, Mugranza is a place that can guarantee profit. The only alchemist who knows the formula, the assistant to the Duke of Glen, will be the first to die in the upcoming war. This is a commodity that can be had at any price, at least until a substitute appears. I can't entrust this to anyone else. A while later, the two stood before a dilapidated house. Yuri tilted his head back and sighed. We're here. This made he and Wu panic. What? Stunned, he pointed at the house and shrieked. Wait, a place that's about to collapse like this? But Yuri had already stepped forward and banged on the door. He called out loudly, Elinwood, are you there? He and Wu was flustered. Prince, wait. We can entrust this to a large merchant guild. But at that moment, someone stepped out. Who is it? A girl in dirty clothes emerged. I am Elinwood. Seeing her, he also introduced himself. Elinwood, I am Yuri, third Prince O'Brien. I have a job for you. Looking at him, she was startled and surprised. The Prince O'Brien? A moment later, a worried he and Wu got close to his face. Prince, are you insane? Yuri growled angrily. There's nothing a prince can't say. He and Wu walked away, complaining nonstop. Anyone who saw you like this would say the same thing I did. This isn't just some spare change. You're entrusting the acquisition of Mugranza to a merchant guild on the verge of collapse. Yuri smiled and thought to himself, right now, she may just be a struggling merchant, but soon, the name Elin will echo across the continent as the leader of a merchant guild that no one had ever heard of before. And unlike Goryo, who hid behind a facade of trust, but was willing to resort to dirty tricks when cornered, Elin considered her promises to customers sacred. Yuri smirked deviously. In her past life, she may have just been a legendary merchant, but in this life, I'll turn her into a legend, beyond all legends. Hernandano, seeing him chuckle, was utterly panicked. What's with that laugh? Then he sighed wearily. Anyway, are you finished, Your Highness? But the answer from Yuri plunged Hernandano into despair. Not yet. There's still one last thing. What? He watched the prince's receding figure. Wait, Your Highness! Hernandano cried out. Where are you going now? Yuri was still lost in thought. The underworld boss, the merchant tycoon, all the others, are ready to become my allies. Now I just need to convince one. Last person. The area was filled with dilapidated houses. The streets were crowded with poor beggars. There were even beggars fighting over food. Yuri and Hernandano were asking a beggar for information. Yuri scanned the area. She has to be around here somewhere. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a spot. Found her. Yuri approached some beggar children who were carrying water. Hello. He placed a hand over his chest and introduced himself. I am Yuri, the third Prince O'Brien. A girl turned her head slightly and asked, the prince? The one who cruelly killed Goryo? The surviving member of the Assassin's Guild. Was this very girl in ragged clothes Asana? Asana looked at the young man before her with suspicion. A prince? What is a prince doing in a place like this? Yuri knew Asana was wary of him. He spoke slowly. You don't need to be so on guard with me. Yuri explained why he was in this desolate place. I only came here because I thought I could help. Asana still didn't seem to trust him. Her eyes were filled with doubt. Yuri turned to Hernandano and ordered, "Give it to me." He gritted his teeth and reluctantly handed over the money pouch. As Hernandano handed the pouch to Yuri, his gaze fell upon a little girl hiding nervously behind Asana's leg. The moment she caught his eye, the little girl became frightened and clung to Asana's hand. So it's this child, Yuri thought to himself. He began to recall events concerning this girl. In his past life, Asana had borrowed a huge sum from Goryo just to get this child treated. He thought, like so many others who borrowed from Goryo, her life was also completely ruined by him. A terrifying image of Asana flashed in his mind. That's what pushed her down the path of an assassin. And eventually, she became one of the most notorious killers. Yuri told himself, "My goal is to stop that from happening." A large pouch of money was presented to Asana. Yuri told her, "Take this and bring the child to a temple for treatment." Asana took the money dubiously. "What do you want in return?" she asked. Yuri spoke in a slightly mysterious tone. "What do I want? Just one thing." Asana looked down, probably thinking he would demand something terrible of her. Now that she'd taken the money, Yuri gave her a bright smile. "I am the third prince, Yuri Brian. Remember that name." Their business concluded, Yuri and Hernandano left immediately. A question arose in Hernandano's mind. He asked Yuri, "Why did you give a beggar that much money?" Yuri replied calmly as they walked. "It was an investment in the future." Yuri thought with a satisfied look on his face. "I've now established connections with the people I will need in the future." He glanced back at the man walking behind him. "Now, there's just one person left." Yuri stopped walking and turned to him. "Hernandano, I have a question for you." Hernandano grunted. Yuri asked Hernandano, "What did you see inside the Founding King's tomb?" He suddenly fell into thought. Then, Hernandano broke into a vapid smile and answered, "Gambling." Faced with such a flippant answer, Yuri was caught off guard. His face showed clear exasperation. What? Hernandano, oblivious to Yuri's expression, recounted what he saw with an excited tone. "I played a game where I bet my life at the Bathory, Lega's casino in the Empire." Yuri looked at Hernandano wearily. "That actually sounds fitting." In the end, he had to drop the question and change the subject. "Forget it. As for what happened today," Hernandano snapped out of his reverie and said gently, "Yes." Yuri held out his fist to him and said enthusiastically, "Keep it a secret, okay?" The evening passed quickly. The next morning, inside Shaun's majestic castle, the king sat on his throne, looking at Hernandano with a frown. He replied respectfully, "Yes, your majesty." The king asked him, "I heard you went out with Yuri yesterday." Hernandano answered honestly, "Ah, yes." Shaun requested, "Can you tell me what happened?" Hernandano began to rummage through his memories of the previous night and slowly recounted the events. "He persuaded me to leave the palace with him." His account continued. "Then, we went to a casino, the biggest one in the capital." As soon as Hernandano finished speaking, Shaun, looking worried, asked, "A casino? Did he gamble there?" Hernandano replied enthusiastically, "Yes, he did." Shaun looked skeptical. "Did he now?" Hernandano was indeed a simple man. He didn't notice Shaun's expression at all. Hernandano continued cheerfully, "I thought he would be good at gambling, but surprisingly, he was awful. He lost all the money I lent him." The king pressed on, "And then what?" Hernandano suddenly hesitated. Then he slowly continued his story. He took money from Goryo and gave it to some old merchant guild. After that, he gave a coin to an orphan child. We just walked around and observed how the people lived. Hernandano added a word of praise for Yuri. "He seems very interested in how people live their lives." Shaun asked further, "And after that he came back?" Hernandano shut his eyes tightly, likely recalling his promise to the prince. In the end, not wanting to betray his trust, Hernandano chose to cover for Yuri. "Yes, that was all." Shaun rested his chin on his hand and said, "I see." He stared intently at Hernandano, likely pondering something. Or perhaps Shaun suspected that what he'd just heard wasn't the whole truth. After a moment of thought, he asked, "Will you be attending the ball?" Hernandano replied cheerfully, "Yes." Shaun was quite surprised by that answer. He replied with a small smile, "I thought you weren't interested in such things." "A man can change his mind." Hernandano told him, "It's been a long time since I've danced." Cut to the training grounds. Yuri was slumped on the ground, looking quite pathetic, while Bernard stood holding his sword, looking down at him. As Yuri rested, exhausted, he suddenly noticed something. He pointed past Bernard. "It seems you're quite popular. Bernard looked curiously in the direction Yuri was pointing. In the distance, two maids were watching Bernard with adoring eyes. They were whispering to each other, undoubtedly about Bernard. Yuri teased him. Those maids can't take their eyes off you. Looks like you'll have to go to the ball. I'm sure plenty of people will be waiting for you. Bernard's heart must be made of stone. He was completely uninterested in such romantic matters. I'm not interested. Bernard changed the subject to Yuri's swordsmanship. Anyway, regarding that sword style, you were right. It has no fixed form. Yuri picked up his sword and slowly stood. Right. I told you. You just have to move according to the flow. Bernard said seriously to Yuri. A mana method that is also a sword style. I truly cannot comprehend it. I'd have to observe you fighting in a real combat situation to properly study it, but that's not exactly easy. However, he did offer some praise. Even so, you're improving very quickly. You're also skilled at controlling mana. Frankly, I'm quite surprised. I didn't expect you to be so adept at mana control. Yuri swung his sword around haphazardly. He thought to himself, I feel a bit guilty. It's only because I've tried to erase all traces of the Brian style I learned in my past life. Bernard's voice pulled Yuri from his thoughts. Don't be in such a rush. I'm worried about you. Yuri was confused. Worry? Bernard replied, yes. You're progressing too quickly. Bernard voiced his concerns. To have achieved so much at your age, but your body isn't fully developed yet. Yuri flashed a bright smile to reassure him. Don't worry. I'll maintain a perfect balance. He suggested, let's continue sparring. A flicker of doubt crossed Bernard's mind. He asked again, are you sure? Yuri said with conviction, of course. Yuri tossed the wooden sword aside. In his hand, he now held a real sword. Let's try sparring with real swords, Yuri said. I need to get stronger and fast, he told himself. Bernard cheerfully accepted his request. Very well. Yuri threw out a challenge. How about we make a bet? If I can land a single blow, you have to attend the ball. One might think Bernard would agree immediately. But no, he refused. No, thank you. Yuri asked why. Bernard answered confidently, because I will win regardless. He added, besides, if you lose, you would just make an excuse to cancel the bet. You have no credibility, Your Highness. Yuri was furious. Just you wait. He gripped his sword tightly. The duel began instantly, with both sides lunging at each other. Yuri declared, I'll get you. Determination shone in both their eyes. But the result was Yuri's defeat. I couldn't do it. Cut to a few days later. The sound of horse hooves clattered on the streets. A few days later, on the day of the ball, a carriage procession slowly made its way toward the castle. Inside one carriage sat a handsome young man and a beautiful, charming young woman. The man was none other than George of the Empire, George, Ivana Grandon. He said to the young woman, your eyes haven't left the window frame. George called her name Katerina. She peered out the window, taking in the sights. It's just been so long since an occasion like this. I'm excited. The young woman was the imperial princess, Katerina, Ivana Grandon. Katerina told George, there's also someone I want to meet. Inside the magnificent castle, Aina asked, how is it, Your Highness? Yuri was lost in thought, gazing at his reflection in the mirror, wondering if his outfit was truly perfect yet. Finally, he replied, it's too gaudy. These decorations are too distracting. Take them all down. Aina was skeptical. In my eyes, it looks fine. You used to love these kinds of things, Your Highness. Has your taste changed so quickly? She announced, it's all done, Your Highness. As she turned to leave, Yuri suddenly spoke up. Aina, let's have a dance. Aina turned back with a startled face. Her throat felt tight. Yes, sir. Yuri looked embarrassed. He scratched his face, his gaze averted. I want to practice dancing, but there's no one else to practice with. Aina's face showed clear disapproval. She stammered, is that really necessary? Yuri raised an eyebrow. What's with that expression? In the end, she still offered him her hand. Are you planning to step on my feet and make me fall? He pulled her hand firmly, letting her body rush towards him, then teased Aina. No, I'm not toying with you. Their hands intertwined. Just follow my rhythm, slowly. Her cheeks immediately turned pink. She looked at Yuri. Your Highness, are you teasing me? I'm quite a good dancer, you know. Do you dance with someone often? Who could it be? As night enveloped the mansion, she continued. I'm quite famous myself. You know, I've just never danced with anyone as short as you before. Yuri didn't hesitate to reply. Just you wait. The height difference won't be a problem for long. Through the large window, the image of them still lost in their dance. He spoke up, reminding her, "You just stepped on my foot, Aina." Hearing that, she showed no sign of embarrassment. "Oops, I misstepped." "You stepped on it again. It was just an accident." In the luxurious room, a soft golden light enveloped everything, blending with the melodious music from the artists. Ladies and gentlemen were lost in the rhythm. From a second-floor balcony, a hand, clad in a glossy black glove, gently raised a golden wine glass. Fear, seated imposingly on an exquisitely carved chair. Observe the scene below. Downstairs, the princes stood together, chatting. Yuri was in conversation, when he suddenly noticed the presence of a strange man. So Baron Sitter came, too. He's truly different from the other knights. In the last meeting, only Baron Arancho was there. Yuri shifted his gaze. He accidentally brushed against the glasses tucked into his older brother's attire. "Brother, is your eyesight getting worse? You've started wearing glasses more often." Cedric picked up a macaron and slowly set the plate down, a smile on his lips. "It's not bad enough for you to worry." A long, resounding blast from a white horn echoed. The main doors outside were bathed in light. Everyone turned their gazes towards the doors in surprise. Josh entered. He presented himself before Fear. The atmosphere was incredibly solemn. Fear took Josh's hand, saying, "Thank you for coming." He quickly replied, "I greatly appreciate this warm welcome." He gestured and added, "I have come with my sister." Yuri was startled. His heart pounded in his chest, surprised to hear Josh's introduction. Catherine appeared, gentle and graceful. She politely lifted her skirt and curtsied to Fear. "Greetings, your majesty." Images from Yuri's memories of Catherine appeared. She was radiant, holding Yuri's hand. Then it all shattered like a broken pane of glass. A piece of paper with the words, "I'm sorry," was burning. He closed his eyes and thought, "I can't form a close relationship with Catherine." He stood sorrowfully in a corner, but she quietly observed him with a gentle smile. Catherine chatted cheerfully with other young noblemen, as if she had known them for a long time. Yuri, while eating a pastry, turned to look back. That's just like Cedric. He's never treated anyone badly. That is the quality of a benevolent lord. From afar, Catherine was still secretly watching his back. He thought, compared to him, Immediately, Yuri's eyes met Catherine's. Suddenly, another prince approached Catherine and invited her to dance. Yuri covered his face with one hand, his other hand gripping an armchair. His face twisted in discomfort. Damn it, a fated relationship destined to end in tragedy. What feelings could I possibly have left? A voice suddenly rang out. It was Aina, appearing with a bright smile. "Your Highness, would you like some cookies?" He replied, "Thank you, Aina. It's nothing." Yuri looked at her and asked, "Are you very tired?" She replied cheekily, "No, not compared to cleaning up after someone's mess every day." Hearing that, Yuri angrily snapped, "Stop being so talkative and bring me more cookies." Aina turned to leave, not forgetting to say, "If you want more, just say so. Take care." Yuri stood leaning against the table, looking up at the ceiling. He let out a soft sigh. Suddenly, footsteps approached him. It was Josh. The moment he saw Josh, Yuri thought to himself, "That's Josh of the Empire, George Ivana Grayson." He was the one who, on behalf of the king, commanded the troops on the battlefield, and he is the one who drove Brian to its doom. With that thought, Yuri bowed politely, placing a hand over his chest as he introduced himself. "I'm the third prince of Brian. Yuri Brian." He reminded himself, "Calm down. I cannot show hostility so openly." Josh of the Empire smiled, staring at Yuri. "That's right." Suddenly, a mysterious smile spread across his face. Yuri suddenly realized something was wrong here. His face turned pale, his eyes betraying a hint of fear. He asked, "You just turned 13 this year, correct?" Just as expected of Fear's son. Josh turned his back to leave, his face full of calculation. "You have some talent." At that moment, Yuri's fist clenched tightly. "For someone who just came to test me, he's far too overwhelming. I know he's still young, but this level of power is unbelievable." He thought angrily, "Damn them, both of those people." Suddenly, a loud cry rang out. Josh of the Empire stood there imposingly, his face turned halfway back with a contemptuous look. Behind him was Aina. She was kneeling on the floor next to a shattered wine glass. He spoke in a mocking tone. "A symbol of the kingdom is so disrespectful." Aina's body trembled. "I sincerely apologize." Josh, maintaining that expression, exclaimed, "Good heavens, this child." At that moment, Yuri panicked. In an instant, Josh drew his sword without hesitation, placing it at Aina's neck. "You've made no small mistake. According to imperial law, the appropriate punishment is death." Witnessing the event, Yuri's teeth clenched in fury. This bastard, he did that to Aina on purpose. Right at a party. Before the sight of Josh pointing his sword at the maid. She made a mistake. He said in a triumphant voice, according to the law, execution is sufficient. Hearing this, Yuri furrowed his brow in anger at his power-tripping attitude. Suddenly, a voice came from afar. Did you come here to ruin my ball? It was Fear. He stepped forward solemnly and said, if you wish to see blood, then do it on your own soil. Hearing this, Josh glanced over, then sheathed his sword and bowed to show his remorse. My apologies. He continued, Your Majesty, the Empire and Brian have respected each other until now. Hearing that, His Majesty Fear replied, yes, but you don't seem to want to respect us. Do you remember Gaensa? At this, Fear's eyes suddenly flared with killing intent as he looked at it, and Josh also replied with a look of confusion. Seeing his attitude, His Majesty Fear quickly spoke up. When you executed a knight of the Empire, our Emperor respected your honor and did not demand you take responsibility for such actions. Josh now showed a bit of indifference and replied, this is the same. I'm doing this to protect the peace and honor of both our nations. Yuri, on the side, listened to their conversation and also fell into thought. In the past, Father killed an imperial knight himself. Cedric spoke up. I don't want to do this either. Let's resolve this quickly. If he brings that up again right now, it means our honor is being put on the line. Right now, Josh was still showing that arrogant attitude. Once again, he pointed his sword at the maid. He said calmly, there won't be much blood. Seeing his outrageous action, Yuri still couldn't stop thinking. Stopping him now is no different from provoking the entire empire. However, demands and conditions, ideals and reality, reason and power. However, Brian never cast aside its honor, no matter what. At this, his eyes suddenly lit up with a ray of hope. That is the oath of Brian. As Josh was still glaring at the maid with murderous intent, a voice suddenly called out. Prince Yuri quickly stepped forward to shield the maid. She is my servant. Are you trying to weasel your way out of this? Then her mistakes are also mine. I had forgotten that I am also a prince. So please consider that. And in the past, I too was a criminal. And this life is the sentence I must bear. Right from the beginning, I had no choice. Please withdraw the decision to execute her. Instead, Yuri's words were resolute as he declared, please consider a duel. As he finished speaking, a loud laugh echoed. But Yuri did not waver. His face remained determined, awaiting Josh's agreement. However, Josh let out a hearty laugh and replied, all right, you said your name was Yuri, right? Hearing that, he quickly replied, yes, Prince. Josh spoke. May I call you Yuri? Of course. All right, Yuri. At this point, Josh turned to speak with His Majesty Fear. Your Majesty, the third prince has made a reasonable offer, so I intend to accept it. What do you think? Faced with the situation, Fear could only nod in agreement. Yes. Thank you. Josh turned to Yuri with a smug look and said, I should have fought myself, but for the sake of honor, I will send someone to fight in my place, as you are young. So I will choose the youngest of the royal guard. Having received approval, he quickly bowed. Thank you. With that, Josh turned and walked away, not forgetting to leave an appointment. See you later then. Once everything was settled, Yuri went to the maid and called Aina, and then he helped her up as she was still trembling. Aina, get up. As soon as she saw him, Prince, Yuri gently patted her on the back a few times and said, go and rest. But Aina was still terrified. She started to cry, saying, but how can I? Prince Yuri quickly comforted her. Don't worry about me. As he finished, the other maids came to help Aina inside. As for him, walking alone, he suddenly came face to face with Catherine. She looked at him with an incredibly affectionate gaze. Yuri shook his head in weary annoyance, saying, all these useless thoughts. Then he turned his back and walked away. Catherine, who was enjoying her drink, also noticed him at that moment. That evening, Yuri was walking back to his room alone when he suddenly found that Cedric had been waiting for him. He spoke up. What are you thinking about? Lost in thought, Yuri only now realized his brother had been waiting for him. Brother? He stepped closer to Cedric and replied, I couldn't let him kill Aina. Hearing that, Cedric smiled and said, you honestly. After saying that, he placed a hand on the boy's head and ruffled his hair. At this, Yuri replied. Yuri was a little surprised. He smiled, thinking it had been a while since he last felt this sensation. Cedric reached out, touched Yuri's hair, and asked, do you want a hand? The person you're about to face. He pretends to be kind, but in reality, he's the complete opposite. At that moment, Yuri suddenly recalled the smug words of that man, George. I should have fought myself. But for honor's sake, I'll send someone to fight in my stead. Since you're young, I will choose the youngest member of the royal guard. If you two are the same age, then even if an accident occurs during the match. But Yuri firmly cut Cedric off, replying, yes, I know what you're worried about. Only then did Cedric feel reassured and say, in that case, I won't need to explain further. I will handle everything. But Yuri replied with a look of triumph. No, I started this, so I will finish it. In his heart, he thought, once he's made up his mind, he'll do whatever it takes to deal with it. Cedric then looked at Yuri with a more reassured smile. I believe in you, Yuri. Of course, for Brian. But what about the ball? Cedric smiled and replied, it's a bit of a mess right now, but I'll take care of it. You go get some rest. Hearing that, Yuri smiled and replied, all right, thank you. If the kingdom hadn't fallen, he would have surely been ruling Brian by now. He turned to go back to his room, but not without thinking. I will get to witness what kind of kingdom Brian will become under his reign in this life. I will fight so that I can witness it with my own eyes, no matter who I have to face. The next morning, Yuri had already headed to the battlefield to fulfill the promise. He made it yesterday's party. Everyone was present to watch him fight. Hyo and Du, sitting in the stands, spoke up. The third prince is participating in a duel. Captain Sun, what are your thoughts? Sun replied, the opponent's spirit is very stable. He is very skilled with the sword, despite not being a knight yet. The knight struck his sword against the ground with a powerful thud just to show off. Sun continued, the Imperial Guard is truly elite. I wonder if the prince will be all right. Why are you smiling? Look, following Hyo and Du's words, Sun turned to look in Yuri's direction. The young boy was still yawning sleepily. But then Yuri quickly composed himself and got into a fighting stance. I don't think you need to worry, sir. Recalling Yuri's past, Archmage is a rank that no one can reach. In the hierarchy for mages at the Magic Tower, it is only granted to one who has mastered primordial magic. Among them, the ultimate magic that can glimpse the fate of the world is called fate-opening magic. In this world, only Hyo and Du has reached that level. Hyo and Du was playing cards with Yuri, but he couldn't escape the boy's earlier taunts. Still acting so high and mighty, yet you can't even win a single round? How pathetic. Let me give you a hint. This was the first time he had lost at a game since obtaining primordial magic. Was that just a mere coincidence? No. Yuri smiled with a satisfied, smug look. With just a glance, he could read his opponent's cards, and even the flow of luck itself. And yet, he couldn't read a single thing from that kid. Instead, what he saw was a vision of a mountain of swords. He had witnessed with his own eyes a young man, with black hair and eyes, the symbols of the Bryan royal family, and the unmistakably arrogant gaze of the third prince. Although his body was covered in blood, he relentlessly swung his sword and never faltered. The vision ended when he collapsed in despair. Perhaps everything began from that moment. The story he had once considered a random coincidence began to revolve around a single point. All right, maintain a proper attitude. However, after witnessing the prince's unusual actions during his recent outing, Hyo and Du became convinced that magic, fate-opening magic, could indeed be used. Back to the present, Hyo and Du suddenly thought, Prince Yuri is a person without a destiny. Snapping out of his thoughts, he let out a sinister smile. Noticing his attitude, some beside him asked, why are you smiling, sir? Look, there's no need to worry. Yuri casually rested his sword on his shoulder and taunted his opponent. My side is ready. How much longer are you going to swing your sword at the air? On the other side, Josh rested his chin on his hand and asked, do you need more time to prepare? But Yuri confidently replied, I can start whenever you're ready. The knight opposite Yuri also spoke up. Me too, Hyo declared solemnly. All right, then I declare this trial by combat to begin. The two combatants on the field took their stances. A shout rang out. Begin. Immediately, Yuri and the knight rushed to attack each other. He was a bit surprised by Yuri. His eyes widened at Yuri's slash. Yuri now tightened his grip on the sword in his hand, as if gaining an advantage. He skillfully darted past the knight again and again, forcing him to react defensively. Faced with this situation, Yuri was quite pleased with his performance so far. The knight, unwilling to lose, began to swing his sword in response. In the stands, Hyo suddenly spoke, Hyo and Du. Hyo and Du immediately acknowledged, yes, your majesty. The king asked in a low voice, how do you think this will end? Hyo and Du just glanced over. The two of them continued to fight fiercely. Out there, the battle was still incredibly tense. He was silent for a moment, then replied, "I do not know." Theo, beside him, continued to ask, "You once said your coming to Brian was fated. Is that right?" "Yes. Is it not time for you to leave now?" "No." King Theo lowered his face and said, "I'm glad to know you do not intend to leave yet." Hearing this, Heo gave an embarrassed smile and replied, "You have bestowed upon a humble mage, like myself, too much honor. I'm very grateful." Theo then looked at him with sharp, cold eyes and said, "Excessive humility can bring disaster upon yourself. I understand. That means nothing major will happen. Is that right?" Heo then smiled and asked, "Who do you think is stronger?" Over in the arena, it seemed the situation had changed. George's knight attacked relentlessly, landing a flurry of blows on Yuri. His gaze turned sharp and emotionless. And at that moment, Theo's words came out. The opponent. Heo also agreed with his answer. "It seems you think so as well." He looked toward the arena and thought, "When I first set foot in Brian, everything was guided entirely by heavenly signs. It had shown me that the one who could turn the world's fate, the strongest person on the 6 continents, was here, but the sword was never drawn. Because of that, I thought I had no reason to stay." Suddenly, he spoke up, which slightly surprised Theo beside him. "I thought my time here had ended." Back at the arena, each of the knight's slashes was incredibly lethal. This was enough to exhaust Yuri. After taking enough injuries from his opponent, Yuri began to regain his fighting spirit. But it seems that moment hasn't come yet. He began to tighten his grip on the sword in his hand. "That's enough probing. Let's end this." Snapping out of his thoughts, Yuri charged straight ahead. Seeing Yuri suddenly accelerate towards him, the knight became a little flustered. He suddenly gotten faster. A brilliant light flashed in Yuri's eyes, showing his determination to win at all costs. Each skillful slash came down on the knight. With fierce determination, he tightened his grip on the sword even more, and with one swing towards him, it was enough to make him feel fear. I'm going to die." What was to come came. George and Catherine couldn't help but be astonished by the bloody scene. Even His Majesty was surprised. Everyone in the stands gasped in horror, screaming, "Oh my God, I can't believe." He turned his sword at that exact moment. At this moment on the battlefield, Yuri didn't strike the knight down, but turned his sword, sparing his life. Then he gave a satisfied smile. The knight began to stammer, I have lost." With those words, the entire stadium erupted in cheers. Even Heo stood up to congratulate Yuri. "I came here to follow the heavenly signs, and then I met someone who challenged them." And even Josh was happily applauding him. Life turned into death, and death turned back into life. At the tip of the 3rd prince's sword, the fate given to that knight has changed. Along with that boy, the entire stadium roared, chanting Yuri's name. Every step he takes now is in defiance of heaven's will. That's right. He is someone who lies outside the fate of this world. Yuri, at this moment, couldn't hide his own happiness. Yuri Brian, the one who surpasses even destiny. Heo endlessly praised him. "You are extraordinary, Prince. To be honest, I can't wait to see how you will continue to change the fate of the world from here on out." Yuri observed the joyful people around him. "Here, where I followed destiny, I met someone who defied it." Josh was also applauding in celebration. Normally, life would turn to death, and life would bloom once more. However, at the tip of the 3rd prince's sword, the fate bestowed upon the attendant, and the boy was rewritten. The crowd cheered wildly. Every step he takes defies the predetermined heavenly fate. That's right. A person who stands outside the world's destiny is a happy person. Gently wipe the smudges from Yuri's face. "Brian, the one who overcomes fate." Yuri smiled broadly. "The one who makes people wonder, how will he reshape the destiny of this world?" I find myself eagerly waiting. In a flash, 5 years passed. At the palace, now in the hallway, a maid was scurrying frantically. Why is everything going so smoothly? If someone were to catch me now. And speaking of the devil, he appeared. A voice made her jump. "Hey, you there." Yuri's brother wore a fierce expression. "Are you new here?" The girl thought to herself. That person has black hair, the symbol of the Bryan royal family. He spoke up, asking, "What are you doing here at this hour?" Well, sweat beaded on her forehead. She told herself to calm down. "I must answer exactly as my seniors instructed." Seeing she didn't answer, he growled. "I asked, what are you doing here?" The maid was lost in thought. If it's the one who always has a bland expression, then that's His Majesty. I heard the crown prince always greets people with a gentle smile. So this definitely isn't him. Those murderous eyes and that crooked posture. By now, he was extremely annoyed. Are you really ignoring me? The maid flinched. He must be the third. He leaned his ear closer, eavesdropping. The third what? She quickly made an excuse. I have something to attend to, so? He realized. So you all share a code of conduct. For dealing with a royal family. Huh? And does it specifically say to avoid me? Is that it? Then, he gritted his teeth in anger. All right, that's enough. Today, I'm going to teach you all a lesson. Just then, a voice spoke up, catching both of their attention. Brother, what are you planning to do this time? This person slowly approached. The maid thought to herself, they warned me about one more person. If I see someone with a confident expression, she noticed the sword at his hip. And he's also wearing a sword at his hip, then it's none other than our Yuri, now 18 years old. He cheerfully chided his brother. Are you bullying the maids again? Is that you? A moment later, Yuri picked up a piece of pastry and put it in his mouth. He walked alone down the hallway. Yuri crunched on the pastry and looked outside. Remembering earlier, were you bullying the maid again? Oh no, it turned out the maid had given him the pastry. Thank you, my lord. This is all I have. Yuri gently wiped the crumbs from his mouth. This pastry I got from that maid is pretty good. He brushed the dust from his hands. His eyes glanced to the side on guard. A blue, mana-like energy emanated from Yuri's hand, a state where, even while holding a sword, the pressure on his hand was lessened by using mana. Then he raised his hand and clenched his fist. Looks like I've reached that realm. Remembering his past life. It's been 5 years since I regressed. After being killed by Lauren's blade. At that moment, Yuri had suddenly woken up back in the past. He put on his gloves. It seems my peaceful days are about to end. They're probably chattering about all sorts of things right now. A moment later, Yuri arrived at a room and knocked on the door. There was arguing inside. Are you ignoring everything I'm saying? That's not it. The guard looked at him worriedly. The noise inside continued. You're the one who refuses to listen to me. Yuri was so angry that he even started using his mana. The guard hurriedly explained. It seems no one can hear you, Your Highness. They're completely focused on the meeting. I think you should try knocking again. Before the guard could finish, Yuri punched the door, sending it flying. Everyone inside looked at him in shock. Wait, Yuri smiled with satisfaction. Pardon me, I did not, but it seems no one heard me. So the second time I used a little force. The guard drooped helplessly. How can you call that knocking? I'm going to get punished for this. Theo, at that moment, had his eyes closed tightly. Father, I wish to join the meeting. Yuri sat down at the table. All right, please continue. One person continued. Anyway, what I mean is, we don't have the surplus troops to support the Allied forces. Another immediately objected. Are you saying we should ignore the request from the Empire? He snapped irritably. Well, the other nobles can accept the offer in our stead. What irresponsible words. Yuri sat and observed them. Each of them is only thinking about their own gains and losses. He put his hand on a piece of paper. That's right. It was around this time that the incident happened in my past life. The call to join the Allied forces from the Empire. They requested reinforcements from many nations and launched a large-scale attack on the horde of orcs to the east. However, the Allied forces were defeated, and in their rage, the frenzied orcs went on a rampage, putting immense pressure on the borders of all the participating nations. All, except for the Empire. Thinking this, his hand tightened on the paper. It was only then that I realized everything, from the very beginning, was part of the Empire's plan. He looked at Lion Flandered. Yuri thought to himself, and in that process, we lost the outstanding knights, who had joined the Allied forces, including Lion. His gaze was resolute. But in this life, I won't let things go that way again. They continued to argue. Anyway, we're not sending anyone. That's final. Do you think we have knights to spare? You should at least. Just then someone cut in. Stop. It was Yuri. Everyone looked at him in surprise. I will go. Yuri stood up abruptly with a resolute attitude. I will join the Allied forces. So you all should show your sincerity as well. Yuri looked very much like a leader. Fulfill your duty as nobles. So the name Brian is not disgraced. His father, seeing this, smiled faintly. He looked at his son and thought, so that's it. That's your move, son. A short while later, Yuri was down below, training with Bernard. Suddenly, his brother came over, shouting his name. Yuri. He was panting, exhausted. Are you really going to join the Allied forces? Yes. Hearing this made his brother even more worried. But why? You're royalty. You don't need to go there yourself. You know what I always say, don't you? Yuri cheerfully rested his sword on his shoulder. It's the duty of a royal. This made his brother feel helpless. All right, Yuri. Today, I finally understand what you're thinking. Today. Then his brother confidently puffed out his chest, his eyes shining. Return safely. In the meantime, I will protect the royal palace. After saying that, he happily skipped away. Yuri was helpless. Such a touching display of brotherly love. As long as he doesn't cause any trouble, I can rest easy. Then, he glanced over at Bernard. Aren't you going to worry about me? Then Bernard finally spoke. As long as you don't act recklessly, I believe you will return unharmed. Thank you for your generous assessment. Bernard frowned. Even so, you must be careful. Yuri looked seriously at him as he gave his advice. The orcs are not easy to deal with. They are much stronger and more despicable than what you might imagine. Especially, be careful if you encounter an orc with a flag on its back. They're called orpo. They are particularly ferocious and powerful, even among orcs. Then Yuri reassured him. Don't worry, I have my ways. Do you have a plan, Your Highness? Just then, Aina rushed in. Your Highness! She was worried and out of breath. A visitor has arrived with the item you ordered. Yuri turned his head, pleased. A plan? Of course I have one. He smiled with complete confidence. A very special plan. At that moment, in a room, a man was sitting, sipping a cup of tea. A moment later, Yuri also opened the door and entered. This is the vice president of the Elin Merchant Guild, Galekmo. Greetings, Your Highness. Yuri sat down and asked, what about Elin? She's currently on the road, so I came on her behalf. Yuri was concerned. Is she still traveling everywhere by herself? Tell her to slow down a bit. She says it's what she does best. Just then, Galekmo took out a box. Anyway, did you come here just for that? Of course not. I have brought the item you mentioned last time. Yuri looked inside, delighted. Well done, Galekmo. Finally. Inside were 3 elemental daggers. Galekmo spoke up, looking at the excited Yuri. Your Highness, is this thing really that valuable? In my eyes, they just look like a few daggers for display. Very valuable. Then Yuri used his mana. They are artifacts imbued with ancient magic. Galekmo's eyes widened in shock. The dagger is moving on its own. It was right in front of him, making him terrified. It's all right. You won't die. Are you controlling it with mana? Galekmo sighed. I didn't know you were this powerful. Magic can be used that way too. Did you think I'd just sit around doing nothing all day? Suddenly, Yuri's eyes flickered, noticing something. Galekmo wondered, what is it? It's nothing. Then Yuri spoke up. Anyway, give my regards to Elin. Next time, report to me on the status of preparations for the branch in the Empire. Of course. Then I shall take my leave. Yuri leaned back in his chair. You can come out now. After those words, a pair of feet slowly appeared. Asana appeared from behind him. How long have you been here? Yuri glanced at her. How is Goryo? Asana removed her veil. I delivered the warning to him as you ordered. Remembering that image, Asana reported truthfully. I left a note right by his head on his bed. Hearing that, he laughed in satisfaction. Well done. He's still relentlessly targeting Elin's money. Then she asked, Your Highness, are you really going to join the Allied forces? I heard the servants talking. Yes, I'm going. Her eyes filled with fear. Please be careful, Your Highness. You say that as if I'm going alone. Then, Asana looked at Yuri. What do you mean? He calmly replied, You're coming with me. Can you keep up? Hearing this, she was a little surprised, but then smiled happily. Then Asana replied, Anywhere is better than where I used to be. All right. I will contact you later. A few days later, the day of his return to the battlefield. By now, Yuri had donned his suit of armor. His brother called out worriedly, Yuri. He looked at him with a gentle, blessing expression. Take care. Yuri was full of confidence. Don't worry, I'm invincible. I'll bring honor to the name of Brian. Then he teased him again. You should also take breaks when you study, brother. Remember to take care of your eyes. All right. A faint smile touched his lips. Then he hugged Yuri tightly. See you later. Yuri cheerfully reassured him. Yeah, I'll be back. A horn was sounded. Fio was also there. He announced seriously, We will now begin the ceremony. Yuri walked up the steps one by one. His gaze was resolute, looking straight ahead. He faced his father. Are you worried, son? Not at all. He commanded, Look behind you. Behind Yuri was a troop of soldiers. All the soldiers you see here are precious lives that you must bear on your shoulders. He closed his eyes tightly, making a silent resolve. Not all of us may return alive. However, I will ensure they do not suffer a miserable death like in my past life. Fio's voice rang out. Are you sure you can do it? Yes, father. Of course. Before he could finish, his father interrupted. Then endure this. Immediately after, Yuri's eyes flew open in terror. He seemed to have fallen into another world and was facing a black and red creature. Killing intent. His hands suddenly trembled. My body won't move. It was approaching. It was coming towards him. His instincts told him that the thing approaching him now was death. The monstrous thing was right in his face. His heart was in turmoil. If I try to avoid it, I'll die. But can I refuse it? Yes, I can. A stream of mana burst forth. His whole body glowed with a blue light. Yuri entered a combat stance. Then he swung his sword towards the monster, breaking free from the illusion. The monster he saw was his father. The two clashed swords, facing each other. Suddenly, his father spoke cheerfully. Well done. Yuri looked at the sword. This is in place of a farewell letter. Theo sheathed his sword and instructed, I won't be long-winded. Come back alive. Yes, father. Then he turned and glanced back. His blade was raised high. Yuri stood before his troops and declared, I'm the third prince of Brian, Yuri Brian. He rallied them. Put your faith in me. Everyone shouted. All troops advance. The scene shifts to a dark place. A monster's hand suddenly gripped an iron bar. The red-eyed monster looked at the person opposite and drooled. Count Zeter appeared here and spoke. So, we meet again after 5 years. Third prince. The sky was turning to dusk, the sunlight fading. A soldier and Yuri were resting in a forest. Yuri wiped a drop of water from his mouth. Then he spoke. We've come quite far, Sir Raymond. How far have we traveled? He replied, we have reached the gates of Zeter. A little further, and we will reach the border town of Zeter. This person was the Brian Knight, Raymond. He continued, after that, we will pass through Ritz and head to the assembly point at Bansack. Yuri stood up. Good. Our current pace is fine. Right. Of course. Suddenly, a person appeared calling, Your Highness. Both immediately turned their attention in that direction. Instantly, an image from his past life appeared in Yuri's mind. This was all. And the person Yuri recognized was Roland Flanderger. He is the eldest son of the Marquis of the Frontier. Roland Flanderger, the bastard who killed me in my past life. Roland knelt respectfully. It is an honor to meet you, Your Highness. He introduced himself. I am Roland Flanderger. Yuri was flustered. All right. Roland placed a hand on his chest. There is something I have wished to say to Your Highness. Even before we met, Yuri broke out in a sweat. What is it? Roland's face was radiant as he looked at him. I admire you. This startled Yuri. What? Roland began to recount. Ever since I heard my father speak of the incident 5 years ago, Your Highness has become my ideal role model. His Highness, the third prince, stood up to protect her. When you drew your sword for a lady in waiting, that was the perfect example of a true knight. Yuri gave a helpless smile, looking at Roland, who was staring at him with shining eyes. He patted his arm. That's right. I've heard about you from your father from time to time. Let's work well together. Roland said loudly. No, to serve you is my honor. Just then, Raymond spoke up. Your Highness, it is time to depart. All right, he reminded him. You should know, Marquis Theon is not a man known for his friendliness or warmth. So, even if he doesn't give you a grand welcome, please don't be offended. Sometime later, night had fallen at the Marquis's palace. A large banner hung before the gate, reading, Welcome, Your Highness the Third Prince. There were also many soldiers standing in wait. Welcome, Your Highness the Third Prince. Seeing this, Yuri sighed and chuckled. He's welcoming me warmly. A bit too warmly, even. The Marquis of the Frontier, Theon, bowed respectfully. You've arrived, Your Highness. Yuri stepped down gracefully. Thank you for the warm welcome, Marquis. Theon replied. We are merely showing our respect for a young man, willing to venture to the front lines. Theon posed a question to him. Have you ever fought orcs before, Your Highness? Yuri laughed. Of course I have. Suddenly realizing he was in his second life, Yuri quickly corrected himself. I have not, but I have read about them. He turned his head. Most of the soldiers here also lack experience in fighting orcs, so I should at least study up. Smiling with satisfaction. I see. That is commendable. He bowed. In that case, Your Highness, Theon asked him, would you mind if I presented you with a gift? A moment later, someone stood before a door in a room. The lock was opened. Yuri and Theon entered, with the Marquis carrying a torch. It is in here, Your Highness. Then he stepped inside with a few soldiers. Suddenly, the door began to close. Yuri frowned. What do you think you're doing, Marquis Theon? He explained, there's no need to be surprised. Inside was a dark cellar, illuminated by torches. Yuri silently observed his surroundings. The soldiers suddenly jumped in fright. They were standing before an orc. For now, let's just call it a prisoner of war, Thean said. He looked at it trembling. To survive, I was forced to learn about them. From their trivial habits to their instinctive behaviors. Everything that can be exploited in battle. Yuri spoke up, asking Marquis Thean, "Is this the gift you mentioned?" He affirmed, "Indeed. With the war against them fast approaching, there can be no more precious gift than this." Hearing this, the corner of Yuri's mouth curled up. "Thank you, Marquis." He thought to himself, "He's crazier than I am. To think he'd dare torture an orc." Suddenly, he noticed a soldier behind him. Yuri spun around. "What is your name?" "I'm Simon Peisu, son of Baron Wolf." Yuri posed a question. "Tell me honestly, what are you thinking right now?" "Yes." He evaded. "I think it is not necessary to go this far. I believe this is too cruel. For a prisoner of war." Yuri looked inside again. "Yes, you may think so for now." Then he called out, "Marquis Thean, open one of the cells." "Yes, sir." Then Yuri looked towards him. "You said you're Simon, correct?" "Yes." An orc suddenly stomped its foot and stepped out. "This is a real battle." Simon faced it. "Go and fight that orc." He broke out in a sweat, facing it grimly. The orc, with bloodshot eyes, roared fiercely. Suddenly, it slammed its own head on the ground. Witnessing this scene, Simon was both confused and terrified. He gritted his teeth, frowning as he looked at it. Then he turned his head and shouted, "This is truly ridiculous. Forcing us to fight prisoners who have lost their will to fight." Just then, the orc lunged and punched Simon in the face. Instantly, his helmet shattered. His eyes rolled back in pain as he spat blood. The others, seeing this, anxiously called his name. "Simon." The orc restrained him. Everyone prepared to fight. A voice spoke up, "Rest assured." Thean stepped forward. "We have already severed most of its tendons." Yuri watched silently. Beside him, Thean called out, "Your Highness." Both of them watched the scene before them grimly. "This is an orc." Thean spoke up, reminding him, "This is an orc. If you let your guard down for even a moment, it will immediately try to kill you." At that moment, Simon was being choked by it, trembling. Everyone was horrified. "Your Highness, we must save him." The ferocious orc tightened its grip on Simon in front of everyone. Yuri, not taking his eyes off it, asked Thean, "Is it taking him hostage?" He replied cheerfully, "I will call for the translator." Then a mysterious figure, head covered, peeked out. "Translate." The one with the strange appearance, with two sharp fangs, was Corey. Yuri then looked at him. "Corey," the figure stammered, "Why yes." Immediately, he clutched his head in fear and translated the orc's words. "If you do not immediately drop your weapons, it says it will start breaking the knight's bones, one by one." Then it forcefully tightened its grip on Simon again, making him scream in pain. Yuri then called out, "Hernando, it's your turn." He quickly cast a spell. "Understood." Hernando raised his hand towards the orc and Simon. Just like that, a stream of blue magical energy enveloped them both. He shouted, "Now's the time." Hearing this, Yuri instantly sprang forward. "Well done." In a flash, he had snatched Simon from the orc's grasp. Before it could even react, Simon had been rescued by Yuri. The orc angrily stomped its foot on the floor. Its eyes were bloodshot. It opened its mouth wide and roared, shaking the room. Seeing this, a question was voiced. "Marquis Thean, this is no ordinary orc, is it?" He also affirmed no. Its body may be small, but its combat experience is extensive. His expression grew serious as he recounted, "When we captured it, it was alone, eating a knight. That is an orc that has killed many people." Hearing this, a knight was filled with indignation. "That bastard! I don't care if it's a prisoner or not. I'll kill it with my own hands." Yuri quickly intervened. "Calm down." He was taken aback. "Your Highness." Yuri glanced behind him. "I don't intend to stop you, but look behind it." Behind the orc were the bloodshot eyes of the others. All of them were waiting for an opening. That one orc is nothing special. The ones we will face on the plains are far more terrifying than these. Then he placed a hand on the knight's shoulder. "Focus. This is training. Learn how to kill an orc." After that, the knights raised their swords and faced the orc. It aggressively wielded a club and lunged at Hernando, who quickly used a magical barrier to block it. Suddenly, the orc spat blood from its mouth. A knight had managed to plunge his sword into its chest. Seeing this, Yuri clapped and praised them. "Well done." But their faces remained grim. No one was happy. "Can't you see why?" Yuri, standing before the orc's corpse, also spoke up. "It's only natural, because this was just a test against an opponent with no ability to fight back. However, this experience will increase your survival rate on the battlefield. Be grateful to Theon. Theon placed a hand on his chest. You may think this goes against the spirit of knighthood. He turned around. But for this scum, they are not worthy of a knightly spirit. Come this way. I have one more thing to show you. After that, everyone followed. This scene here is actually just a simulation. In the orc camps, even more cruel acts are taking place. A moment later, he led Yuri to a place. What you are about to see now is the consequence of their actions. Yuri thought to himself, I understand. A knight beside him appeared horrified. This is, looking at the group, Theon explained, they are half-orcs. Yuri frowned. More than I thought. He also affirmed, indeed, and creating them is not an easy task. At this, Simon was stunned into horrified silence. Theon continued, the orcs capture humans and treat them like toys, and this is the byproduct of their fun. Yuri looked at him and wondered, do you hate orcs, Marquis? Theon averted his gaze. I do, and I will continue to hate them until the day I die. Hearing this, Yuri just silently looked at him. A knight touched the sword at his hip, thinking, His Highness is calm, as if he's already too familiar with this mess. Everyone has an irreconcilable enemy. For me, it is the Empire. For Marquis Theon, it is probably the orcs. I heard that he found the body of his son in an orc village. Yuri looked at him, sighing internally. Perhaps that sight has never faded from his eyes, just like how I can never forget the sight of my kingdom's fall. The night passed. Now, the sun had risen over the castle. As Yuri was preparing to leave, a voice called out, Your Highness. Theon, with Corey beside him, was resolute. Please, take this man with you. Yuri realized, he's the one I saw in the cellar yesterday. Theon confirmed, yes. His name is Corey. Yuri smiled faintly. The ability to speak the orc language is an invaluable skill. At this, Corey anxiously spoke up, Sir. I have something I must say. But Yuri held up a hand to stop him. He said confidently, I already know. This surprised and confused Corey. Then, Yuri tossed him a pair of gloves. I know what you're worried about, so don't worry anymore. All right, now I will entrust this to you. I hope you will work well in the future. Corey took it a little warily. But something this valuable. But Yuri paid no mind and turned his head away, calling out loudly, Lord Raymond. Yuri looked at him and asked cheerfully, past this point is the border, correct? Raymond immediately replied, that's right. There will be quite a few monster packs, but you won't need to worry about being ambushed. Yuri sighed. No, you're mistaken. The monster packs are also a threat to the border, no different from the orcs. An assertive voice rang out. We must wipe them all out. The scene changes to a forest. The sound of clopping horse hooves could be heard. A group of people on horseback was heading somewhere. A man dismounted, blocking a group of people carrying goods. His eyes glinted with a murderous rage. This man on horseback raised his sword high. Just like that, streaks of blood gushed out, beginning a massacre.